Afternoon, everybody. This
I did
is,
the first one.
excuse me, Howie.
I was on the board with Mick and I.
This is a meeting, joint meeting of the Board of County Commissioners of Picken County and the Open Space and Trails Board on Tuesday, April 7th. And we will be discussing the management plan for the North Star. I can't think of the exact name of it. North Star Management Plan. And Gary Tannenbaum is here to present that to us.
Thank you, Steve. I'm Gary Tannenbaum, Assistant Director of Open Space and Trails. And we're happy to be here today to talk to you about an update to the North Star Nature Preserve Management Plan. And with me today, I've got Open Space and Trails staff Lindsay Utter, our Senior Environmental Planner. And we have consultants that helped us do the biological inventory and the geomorphology on the property. And it's Golder is the firm. And I got Randy Mandel right here, and Jonathan Losky with Colorado Wildlife Science. And so today, what we would like to do is to kind of tell you, this is kind of the kickoff of the North Star Management Plan public process. And so today we are looking at giving you an overall presentation of where we're at with this update to the management plan. The management plan you guys all have in front of you. And to go over the process of it, basically we have been working for the last about 7 or 8 months on working through an update to the biological resources on the property. Our scope is looking at the geomorphology in conjunction with the wildlife and the vegetation and the wetlands on the property. And so we have hired Golder to do an overall review of that, and they have created a nice fat report for us to overview, and they'll get into it in a little bit. We have a lot of partners on this project. The North Star Nature Preserve is under a conservation easement with Aspen Valley Land Trust. And so they are one of the partners we have been in discussions with on updating this management plan. We have the Forest Service, who is a landowner for the put-in for the popular stretch through the Roaring Fork River. We have the City of Aspen. This plan is going to incorporate 2 properties that we have. And so the City of Aspen is a major partner on this property since they are co-owners of the James A. Smith North Star Open Space, which is adjacent. And we also have the East Aspen Caucus that we've gone and met with. And we've also, we've been working really well with the Aspen Center for Environmental Studies, ACES. ACES was an old manager of this property when it was first purchased, and so they are a major component on how we're going to manage it in the future. So to go through the public process is we've gone through the draft plan development, and one of the big partners I almost forgot and is Healthy Rivers and Streams. Healthy Rivers and Streams is a partner that has also looked at the geomorphology on North Star as ways to improve the Roaring Fork through this stretch. And we have met as a joint meeting with the Open Space and Trails Board to go over how we can collaborate with them in the future on the management of North Star. And so looking at this process today is the first review, and it's to gain feedback from the Open Space and Trails Board and the Board of County Commissioners. And we would incorporate that feedback into the management plan. We are going to go to the Healthy Rivers and Streams Board on April 16th and give them a presentation on the management plan and get their feedback and put the feedback into the management plan. We're going to go to the City of Aspen Open Space and Trails Board and do the same thing, give them a presentation and get their feedback incorporated in the management plan. And then on April 23rd, we will have all those changes to a plan, and the Open Space and Trails Board will review that, make any further changes that they would like to see before we release it for public review. and we're scheduled to start releasing this for public review on April 27th. And at that time, we are going to work with all our partners that I've mentioned, ACES, AVLT, anyone, the caucus, and anyone else who we'd like to present, we will go to and present to, and then we will send it out for the overall public comments and receive that. After that, we will bring it back to the Open Space and Trails Board and to the BOCC with all the public comments in there for adoption. And this plan in 2000 was adopted by ordinance by the BOCC. And so this plan will be the same way as the Open Space Board will make a recommendation, and the BOCC will update that ordinance on the approval of the plan. So that is the big public process and the process that we've been going through. And so looking at this planning area, North Star Nature Preserve, I think if you read through the history of this property, it is so unique in our system. It's the first open space property that the county purchased in 1978 through the help of the Nature Conservancy. Before an open space program was even thought of, you guys made it happen on a pretty expensive piece of property all the way out in the East Aspen area. And it's great because this was the original purchase, was the North Star Nature Preserve, and that was purchased in '78. And the river's always been used, and the property had some little use going through there at times. As we started moving on, there was a management plan drafted in 1989 that I can't find, but what I've been told about that management plan was really it took some existing studies on the river and other things, and basically, set out the guidelines on how ACES would help manage it. They did some they put some structures in the stream to try to do some habitat improvement and stuff, but not much happened until all of a sudden, and Jonathan's here, he was part of the original drafting of this management plan in '99 through 2000, and it was starting to get more used, and there were some more uses. The paragliders were landing over on North Star, and hang gliders were landing on North Star, and you had the river users on North Star. And the county really, this is the first true management plan that the county really was going to undertake in a way of a public process. And it was not a completely clean process. It was a messy process. But in the end, it came up with a compromise. It basically said this is going to be managed as a major nature preserve, and some limited recreation would be allowed here. And people like the paragliders were only going to be allowed to land here, and their numbers were going to be limited. There was only going to be one commercial operator through here. There were only going to be certain access corridors and everything else. And in the end, it worked. The property, as these guys will tell you, is actually, you guys at the time prohibited all human use except for educational and some maintenance back here. That was huge. This is a huge, and you'll see, it's a huge nature preserve. It's a beautiful fen that's back there. It's a beautiful wetlands. I mean, it's really pretty habitat. So overall, I mean, it's great. The management plan is, I'll tell you, it's working. We just want to slowly tweak it and, add some new nuances to it. We have some different uses or increased uses that we want to manage for. And so that's why this update is necessary. One of the other things is in 2001, the James H. Smith open space was purchased, adding an extra 70 acres to this. There was an interim plan done at the time, and it was always thought that once this got updated, potentially we can combine this all. Because it is really North Star Nature Preserve. They're managed very similar. And so this update will incorporate the entire piece as North Star Nature Preserve. in the plan, you can see we found, thanks to Janet, and Janet did a great job putting this plan together, and so did Lindsay. They found some great historical photos of use at North Star, the skating thing. Oh man, how cool would that be? And you know, these are great, cool things. The history, I mean, you can read through it. It is really cool to see the history of this property. It's a very unique history. Not all of our properties have that unique of a history, but it's really impressive to see. And so, you know, now in the draft report, one of the things I'd love to go through is the existing conditions. And, you know, we have existing management plans, the North Star Nature Preserve, as I talked about, and the James H. Smith. We did a interim plan when it was purchased with the city, and that's been in effect since. And so it is confusing when you go out there. All of a sudden you go from North Star Nature Preserve to James H. Smith, North Star Open Space, and it really doesn't look that much different, but it's a different name. And so, and then we have other existing management plans that tie into North Star. It's our signage guidelines, the Pickens County Nordic Trails Plan, and the master plan for the East Aspen area. So, one of the more exciting parts of this is looking at the existing conditions for the natural resources. And I'm going to turn it over to Randy and then Jonathan to really to give you like an update on the geomorphology. The Open Space Board has seen some of this, but it's been updated. And we've got some new information that really goes along with more of what Morgan Smith, James A. Smith's son, was talking about. Is there were some major human impacts that potentially helped create the straightening of the river and all this stuff. But let me turn it over to Randy to start talking about geomorphology.
So first of all, thank you very much for having us today. It's an honor to be involved and to speak to all of you. This property is a gem, and working on properties all over the state and the West, most of them are not nearly this nice. So all to be congratulated on maintaining and purchasing this gem in the first place. Secondly, there were two major features that really helped to shape the current geomorphology, and that's really the river science in plain speak that's plainly visible on here, and that is the straightening of the river. Largely it took place for agricultural purposes, so they could hay the property and use it for ranching. And secondly, the trans-mountain diversion, removing approximately 38% of the water. And those two factors combined have reduced the amount of water and therefore the amount of water energy that is flowing through the property. And that change is causing a difference in the way that the river is acting through the property, as well as a general drying out that we're seeing on the vegetation. And that drying out is both expressing itself in the aspen, probably combined with global warming or climate change, in that the aspen are suffering from what's known as SAD, a rapid die-off, you know, a sudden death syndrome. And then we're also seeing a change in the wetland vegetation, going to more of an introduced and more of a meadow-type vegetation that shouldn't naturally be there. And together these things are acting in concert to potentially threaten the gem that you have here in your community.
So, on to the true pieces of the geomorphology. I mean, these are really cool photos that we found because, you know, the reality is what we saw in the picture before is you see a lot of the topo maps and the old topo maps, and they show kind of the river in the place that it is. But what we have found through the historical photo search is really truly, you can see it on this aerial photo. The river used to do this, and you can see it in the historical photos that it actually did do that. And so sometime, you know, before the, you know, sometime in the early 1900s to mid 1900s, this has significantly altered the river course through North Star.
And Gary, this is a very important point for the board to understand, is that there's a terminal moraine, which is basically the geologic equivalent of a plug that you can see about where that red mark is at the very end, the dashed line. And what has happened through a combination of the straightening, the change in the amount of water and geologic process, but from our point of view, primarily the straightening and the change in the water in the last 100 years, is that there is a breach that is occurring in that moraine. And what will happen is, if that breach is considered to be something like a plug in a bathtub, if that plug is breached, the hydrology, the natural wetting effect, if you look at this as a sponge, will change drastically, and that will cause a huge environmental alteration, actually, of North Star in and of itself.
And
Can I ask a little more in depth about why those things cause a breach? It would seem like less water, if it's a dam type of structure, would leave the water below it and in the bathtub, as it were. But what is it is it breaching down below, or is it breaching?
It's actually a combination of effects. Now, the most important thing to remember is the landscape was set through geologic process. You know, that moraine started to naturally erode long before the removal of the 38% or so of the average water happened. So there was already, if you look at it, a nick in place. But when that was combined with straightening,
Okay, just blasted right through.
what happens with straightening is the energy picks up, because what a meander is a means of a system adjusting for itself to reduce the overall energetics. And when you straighten that energy is then focused on a given point. So even though there was less water, the water focus was intensified. And that exacerbated, if you will, made more serious and more intense, the actual effect.
Okay, thank you for helping with that.
And just to orient you a little bit, that moraine sits, it's that hill that lies right in front of where Jimmy Smith's old house was.
Right at the preserve.
Yeah, so right there where by the bridge, by the Stillwater Bridge, that hillside is the moraine, and that carried across
Okay.
the river.
And it bends the river, right?
Well, that bend it bent around it, and that's where it's cutting through. That was a natural meander that was resulting from that, the shift in topography
And so to get into now, we're just looking at existing conditions before we start really talking about management actions. So the wildlife piece is, when you could look at it, wildlife piece is why this property was so special and why we preserved it. And that's what people really think of as a nature preserve is, does it contain the amount of wildlife that this property should contain? And Jonathan could do a good job of telling us what he found.
Well, and I'm sure many of you remember the contentious nature of that first North Star management plan, when this room was packed with like 100 people. It was worse than when you were doing rural and remote and other things like that. It was insane.
Well, Jonathan, let me just clarify. I was here then. Mick and I sat on that first management plan organization. So it was my first year on the Board of Commissioners that we did the management plan. And now I am back on my first year on the Board of Commissioners. So thank you very much for bringing this forward.
We're waiting for you.
Thank you.
As Gary said, the net result was a compromise. And both sides hated us because we had Kirk Baker and Dick Jackson on one side who wanted all recreation all the time. And then we had some other folks who wanted North Star to be off limits to all people all the time. So that's how we ended up with this compromise where the west side of the river, often people call it the south side, but it's actually the west side, where it's only for education and management purposes, and the east side of the river with limited recreation use. And the net result is that all of the species that we expect to occur out there are there. And many of them, in fact most of them, are flourishing. with the lone exception being the great blue herons, and I'll get into that a little bit. But for example, you know, everybody here knows about the bear issues we face here. Yet at North Star, this field season, I was able to identify 13 individual bears occurring at North Star, doing what bears are supposed to do, eating what they're supposed to do, and that included 2 sows with 2 cubs and 1 sow with 3 cubs. And they had plenty of forage out there. One of those sows was a double red-tagged bear. If she gets into trouble one more time, she's gone. But she's out there doing the thing that she's supposed to do. So it's because of, you know, Pickens County, I think, is 85% wilderness area, yet it's the lower elevation places that wildlife need that are not protected. That's where most of our development occurred. So it's protections of areas like this that can really help species like black bears to coexist with the human development in this valley. One of the things that we found is that mule deer use North Star in the non-winter months to a far greater extent than we thought they did. We found that there's 3 species of weasel out there and possibly 2 more. There is really solid small mammal diversity out there. 79 species of birds occurred on North Star during the breeding season. There's 5 wading birds and 7 species of waterfowl. At least 8 different species of raptor use North Star. We've got 11 vertebrate species of CNHP, Colorado National Heritage Program conservation concern, and 17 bird species that are recognized by federal and non-governmental agencies of being of conservation concern or in decline occur at North Star. We've got lynx habitat immediately adjacent to North Star on both sides, on Smuggler and Richmond Ridge. We haven't documented them at North Star, but North Star could be a really important movement corridor between those 2 areas. We know that they move just up the road a little bit at Lincoln Creek. Moose, as you all know, have moved into our area. They're occurring regularly at Difficult and at Taggart Lakes. It's only a matter of time before they start showing up, and that's both a conservation issue as well as a human safety issue that Lindsay and Gary are going to have to deal with because they can be aggressive. As I said, the one concern out there is great blue herons. The great blue herons have been there for a very long time. Joy Smith, Jim B. Smith's daughter, who was the last owner of James H. Smith North Star Open Space, talks about, having big parties out at her barn there, and the herons really couldn't care less that she was there. And they were on the other side of the river from where that barn location is. What we saw is that just in around 2012, the herons moved, because herons do this, they move back and forth along the river because they destroy their own nesting habitat through acidification of the soils from their guano. So they shifted over to the cottonwoods and spruce at the former barn location, and right around that time, productivity and number of nests dropped substantially. And Charlie Hopton needs to be credited. He's been monitoring it. His wife, Heather, who's no longer with us, monitored them for many years before. Charlie's kept that up in her memory. But they're declining, and we're not exactly sure. It may be coincidental, but we should look a little further. That right around 2012 is when the river use went through the roof. And when I say through the roof, we're talking about exponentially. When we worked on that management plan in 99, 2000, you had occasional canoers out there once, and you had, Charlie MacArthur and Kirk Baker with their kayaking groups. But now the number of tubers and everything else, I mean, you guys documented, what, 1,000 users on July 4th weekend?
That's huge.
Something like
you
that?
can look at me, but that's what we're talking about.
Something, okay, so they'll talk about that. But so it happened right around when that boom happened. So there may be a direct correlation. So we need to look into that further. Otherwise, all of the management actions that we're recommending are not likely to shift the species composition and richness out there. But what they are going to do is increase the overall carrying capacity and the production success of the species that are occurring out there.
John, can I ask you a question? About the time we saw the lower incidence of the herons up here, when did we start seeing the other rookeries, or were those already established? One up Woody Creek area, one up, I thought there was one that had been observed up Castle Creek.
Well, the one in Woody Creek is the newest in the valley, and that started right around the time we had that first abandonment down at Rock Bottom Ranch, and whether those two things were related or not, so that was around 2008. But herons are doing great overall as a species. You know, down in Florida, they hop up to you and take your sandwich away from you. But in Colorado, they think, Rocky Mountain Bird Observatory believes that overall there's more heronries in the state than there were when, Dominguez and Escalante came through.
What do they call them, heronries?
Heronry.
Heron-
Rookery is a misnomer.
Okay, I kind of like rookery, the word,
Rookery
but
is where rooks
heronry.
live.
Well, rook.
Don't get me
You don't want
started.
to,
Don't go there.
But you can call it a colony.
Down, boy, down, boy.
Well, what I was trying to get at is when we saw the lower population up here, was it perhaps that those birds were now nesting elsewhere in our valley?
That we don't know. What we
Okay.
do know is that North Star is one of the 3 highest elevation heron colonies in the state of Colorado. They do occasionally try up Hunter Creek.
Right.
But as far as, there's 2 nests that go back and forth, but as far as we know, they've never fledged young up there. So North Star might be right about at their elevational limit. The
Right.
one down by Cattle Creek is, varies for anywhere from, 30 to 75 nests. That's really productive down there. But over on the Front Range, you've got heronries that have, 400 or 500 nests. And in
Right.
other parts of the country, you have 1,000 nests.
'Cause I know the one down valley, it's like driving through a condo of herons.
It all
Condos,
depends
yeah,
on
they're
the
huge.
availability of forage.
Okay, thank you.
Jonathan, you didn't talk about fishing or fishing.
That's something we have not, nor has CPW sampled fish at North Star. In terms of trout, North Star's production is not great, and a lot of that has to do with the flushing flows and the substrate. One thing that we're looking at, and we'll get into this a little bit more, but I could jump into it. The beavers used to be constantly removed from North Star by various people, some neighbors that didn't like them damming up ditches and cutting down trees, stuff like that. That no longer happens. And so we know of at least one bank lodge at North Star. Beavers are becoming more and more active. And because of that, they're cutting side channels and starting to reopen some of the meanders just because they go back and forth. And it's through their dragging aspen and cottonwood branches back and forth, they cut that down, and when the river comes up, the water flows back in there. But by doing so, they may be creating new spawning habitat for trout. We had whirling disease, and the Roaring Fork River is a WD positive stream. So whether, the brookies, browns, and rainbows are reproducing up there or not, that I'm not sure. And if that's something we want to talk to Kendall Backage, the fisheries biologist at CPW, we can. Right now, and Gary, correct me if I'm wrong, under the 2000 plan, the fishing was prohibited up there. I don't know.
Except by boat.
Except by boat.
Except by boat.
Right.
So I don't.
Boat afloat.
And so there is some desire to fish up there. It's a good place to learn to fly fish because you can fish out there and there's not, a lot of, at least on the east side of the river, not a lot of stuff to block it. But there are trout in there and there are big trout. It's hard fishing because they see you coming. Anybody who's walked up to the river, they take off, but it's a possibility.
Rachel?
As you're taking comments for the management plan, I think it would be valuable at some point to incorporate some more serious fish studies and what do the fish need. And I'm thinking about that for the health of the property naturally, but given that there's a potential for future water diversions of up to 20% more of the Roaring Fork River from the headwaters, having those baseline standards in place is going to be very important for negotiating any sort of mitigation measures or what they actually end up being allowed to take. And so we need to use this as a jumping off point for those efforts. And I think in the past, there was a study the city did, it was quite a while ago, but related to the overtopping of the banks in North Star and then recharging the alluvium for the city's water's interest. And so I think we need to maintain that as a perspective as well, that again, it's very important that occasionally we get that overtopping water so that we recharge. And so let's keep building the groundwork for future concerns there.
Well, and you'll see one of the management actions is potentially to do that last piece. The fisheries part is something, you know, it's a tough one working with Division of Wildlife on that one, because you want to sample more than just North Star, because we'll figure out the whole thing. But we have done macroinvertebrate studies with the Roaring Fork Conservancy on that.
Yeah.
But I think you're right, we should add some.
To think
working
about
out.
what would be good baselines in the future for us.
Okay.
To build on my earlier points about the change in the hydrology, again, if you look at North Star as analogous to a sponge, historically when there was more water in the system maintained a greater degree, if you will, of wetness, and that wetness was reflected in the vegetation. And what's happening through the straightening and the removal of almost 40% of the water, potentially more, very valid point there, is that if you look at this photograph on the left, this is a transitional area. Sorry, apparently I am not very good with these. And what you'll see in here is you'll see these bare areas that are developing. And unfortunately, this is developing all over the North Star complex. But it's not just the bare area that indicates the drying out of the system. If you look at this as a transect, this area back here where I'm pointing is actually more of a sedge fen, where sedges are a obligate wetland plant. And as the system dries out, and they believe that 30% of the wetlands in the system are already gone, and this is something that is, in the short period of years that we as a group have been looking at this, we can see what's changing. Since basically the 90s, we're able to come in here and see visibly, let alone scientifically, what's happening, is the sedges are drying out, and it's transitioning first to this blackish grass, which is a Baltic or Arctic rush, but then changing to more of an introduced or weed-dominated system and these bare areas. And the system builds on itself. This thing takes on, if you will, a synergism, where unfortunately the dry out continues to build and continues to become more of a factor if it's not addressed. Secondly, if we look over here at the aspens, there's two primary diseases that are taking place. Now, before we even get into diseases, as you look at these spindly, unfortunately not healthy trees, you notice there's no aspens coming up. There's some other shrubs that are coming in, but there's no reproduction that's taking place. That's a bad thing, because aspens, as all of you probably know, are clonal. They come up from the roots. Secondly, what happens is through a combination of woodpeckers, bears, and diseases, the bark opens up. And two primary diseases, one called anthracnose and the other one called cytospora, will move in and cause the aspens to further decline. If you combine this with drying out as likely associated with climate change, what's going to happen is you're going to lose the aspens. And while aspens don't take up a large part of the land on North Star, they're a huge part of the biological functionality, where all the organisms, at least the vast majority, as Jonathan can tell you, are very dependent on those systems. And so together, the drying out of the wetlands and becoming a transitional area, and the loss of the aspens and the impact that they have on the beloved wildlife and the functionality of the entire system is something that we're hoping to address through the management plan.
One of the cool pieces is this. It's the big wetland that I just always call the wetland, and it's really an impressive piece. There's some definitely threats and problems with it, but I'll let Randy explain what it actually is.
So this is really exciting. This is, every once in a while you get a chance to do something involving, real science. The so-called wetland is actually a fen. And what a fen is, in plain words, is it's a wetland complex that has more than 14 centimeters of peat, in other words, of moss, as a component. And these are relatively rare. Only 2% of the wetlands in Colorado are actually fens. And to find one on North Star, first, really drives home and gilds the point that you all, as a board and as a county, were very smart to make that a preserve. And secondly, a lot of the functionality and perhaps a strong degree of the specialness, if that is indeed a word, that's taking place out here is associated with this fen. And we're very pleased to be able to find it and classify it. And the individual who did so is a former field regulator for the Army Corps of Engineers. So it's not conjecture. Travis Morris did an excellent job with the initial characterization of this.
So a fen is groundwater fed versus a wetlands that is surface water fed?
For the most part, that's correct, or often it's probably a synergism between surface and groundwater. But if you look at it, it's certainly a contained system, and technically more than 14 centimeters of peatland would be the technical description of a fen.
Now we're going to go into the recreation piece of this. And the great thing is the recreation and the wildlife, and you guys did a really good job in 2000 figuring this out. And I'm going to have Lindsay go through kind of the existing conditions on what we got going on right now.
So, like Gary said, the 2000 and 2001 on James H. Smith, those two management plans set the stage for the recreational use that we see out there today. The river itself, oh, this was not working. Sorry, yeah. The river itself, as we all know, is open to recreation, and the major access point for that is on the forest. That's something we don't control. But we do control the access points across North Star to the river. So there were 3 major access points set out in that 2000 plan. The most heavily used one on North Star would be the takeout at the pedestrian bridge. All 3 corridors are roughly 20 feet wide according to the 2000 plan, but users are supposed to stay on the trail. The second one would be the beach access point, and then that one also includes the beach itself. And then the third access to the river is the south gate, which goes off the south parking lot to the river and is used as a launch point mainly for paddleboarders. East of Aspen Trail traverses both properties. And then the recreational use on James H. Smith is the interpretive loop, and then a 2-track that continues to the river that's theoretically reclaimed down to a single track and is seasonally closed for the herons. There's also the landing zone and the wildlife viewing platform. And that's really it. That's the major recreational access points on North Star in the summertime. In the winter, it shifts a little bit.
No, this is not even working for me. Okay, sorry.
So in the winter, the recreational uses shift a little bit. There's the grooming all across the North Star property, and then so Nordic, groomed for Nordic on North Star, and then winter use is allowed on the trails on James H. Smith, although it is not groomed. The landing zone is groomed and used in the winter as well. And then you could theoretically go to the wildlife platform. It's not closed. The current plan, the 2000 plan, is silent on the access corridors to the river. So it does not say that they are closed, although the Nordic system and the loops kind of theoretically take that place. Then looking to current parking conditions. So we know that we have our North Star parking lot and our South North Star parking lot, and then we also see a lot of parking along the shoulders, in particular at the beach, and then at the pedestrian bridge access corridor. So users are parking along the highway right-of-way in both those locations. That Ped Bridge is off the map. But the North Star parking lot mainly serves the trail itself. You can also park there to get to the wildlife viewing platform. And then the south parking lot serves the landing zone and is mainly used by the landing zone users and then the south gate users. And then maybe an occasional user that parks there and then walks over to James H. Smith. So right now, we mainly see at the access points at the beach and then the Ped Bridge where we have these major parking issues along the highway corridors.
And commercial and special use, I mean, right now, the commercial uses that are allowed at North Star are the power gliders. They have a certain number of uses that they are allowed. They are not exceeding that use, and it's been pretty compatible with the other uses at North Star. And we also have one commercial operator right now that is permitted on North Star, and that's Aspen Kayak and SUP. And so that's the real brunt of it. There's not a lot of special use that happens at North Star. We always once in a while get photography or something like that out there, but special use overall, we don't have a ton of special uses that are going on.
And isn't part of the permission for the paragliders or Aspen Adventures, or what is what is?
As Parapont.
Yeah, that they have to do maintenance, they have to restore and preserve, they do weed management in their landing area. Do they still do that?
In the plan, it's not necessarily clarified on what they have to do, so we're going to clarify it in this next management plan. What we have been doing is it's just easier for the county while we're doing our other management to manage that too.
Because I know in the past there had been efforts that they had done,
Yes.
and they had done a really good job. I just want to give them credit.
They've been trying very hard to work with us on all of that
Okay.
stuff. So I've talked earlier about the public and partner comments. They've been incorporated into the draft plan as of now. I mean, we've also met with the commercial operator that's out there, both the Aspen Parapont and Aspen Kayak and SUP. We've done public surveys this summer. We did public surveys online, and we also did public surveys where we had somebody going out to mostly the beach area to really talk to people and get their feedback on the property. We went to the East Aspen Caucus meeting in, I think it was August, and got feedback from them. They have a very fun caucus meeting once a year at Bob Oxenberg's, and we have just a nice little party, and they were really great. It's a lot of them, and it's great to hear the feedback from the residents. So we got pretty good feedback at that time from them. And we've been working with all of our other partners, Picken County Healthy Rivers and Streams, with the National Forest, City of Aspen, ACES, ABLT, and also Roaring Fork Conservancy that does do sponsored floats in this area. Now we're getting into the meat of where this plan is changed from the 2000 management plan and how it's going to incorporate both properties together. And so there are main management actions that are incorporated into this plan. They're separated into just maintenance, natural resource management, recreation management, commercial and special use, and education and outreach. And so the first piece is just how are we going to maintain for what we have going on right now, and that's just mowing, plowing, parking lot maintenance, mosquito control. The East Aspen Mosquito Control District has access to North Star to do their mosquito control out there. It's worked really well with them. They work very well with us and let us know when they're going to be out there. There's one of their mosquito control guys right there checking in. Pack in, pack out was a very important piece. This is a nature preserve. We didn't want to create a ton of garbage cans and dog poop cans and all this stuff. It's right along the highway. If we put a bathroom out there, it would become a rest area for Highway 82. So we really are trying to get an ethic from people to pack in, pack out. And one of the things we really need to work more closely with John Ely and Healthy Rivers and Streams is really looking at all our water rights out there and making sure what we have going on, because some of the issues that Randy and Jonathan have seen out there, are water rights a potential help to this or not? What are they? And we just need to clarify that. It should have been clarified by now, but it hasn't, so we just need to make that happen. So, getting into the natural resource management side of this, I'm going to let Randy kind of talk about this because I think, these are different than what we had in the 2000 plan. The 2000 plan was a little more vague on stream banks and all this stuff, and so in this plan we wanted to get actual projects. We want to start them now. The Healthy Rivers and Stream Board is very excited to help us now. So in the plan that we have and this plan, nothing is really changing on that, but I'll let Randy go through a couple of these specifics.
It'd be my pleasure. The first is, to talk about basically how to re-wet those wetlands. It would be awesome to get our 38% of the water back. Unfortunately, probably not going to happen, at least this week. So what can we do with the water that we have? And one of the primary things is to address these ditches and lateral water surface features to spread the water back out and to either remove or somehow cause positive effect to these head gates, such as the one pictured right here. And through doing that, or through a series of check dams, we can spread the water back out over the meadow and use the water more wisely than just sending it back downstream. And yet, because that water is not going to be held captive, it's going to re-wet the sponge and then be back in the system, there's not an adjudication issue. We'll fend off a question before it's asked. Secondly, one of the main ideas that we're very excited about is to go back into the river. There's some mature cottonwoods under which it's a very, what they refer to as a sugary sand that's eroding at the base of the cottonwoods. And actually, Gary, Jonathan, and I, years ago, were involved with some restoration projects on here and used some of the same techniques of laying back the bank, 3-to-1, 4-to-1, maybe even 5-to-1, to better protect the cottonwoods, preserve those resources, and all the good things they do for the animals and the plants, and the macroinvertebrates and everything else is dependent upon this, to help preserve the excellent system that you have in place, and to try to environmentally manage in concert with the amount of water that you now have, rather than pretend, unfortunately, we're going to be able to get our 38% back.
And then some of the other things are, there are existing in-stream structures that have been done in the past, and we want to carefully analyze those to see if we really, what's the consequence of taking them out? They've been in the stream for so long, there could be a significant consequence of taking them out. So we want to analyze that. And then, the big one that we want to investigate is to reconnect the floodplain to the existing river channel, as Randy has talked. And there's potentially a lot of different ideas on how to do that. And I think one of the big things we want to put in this plan is to put out a bid to just look at that and look with the city of Aspen, the water department and all their studies, Healthy Rivers and Streams, and do a collaboration study of what that would look like, what the positives and negatives of all of it, because yeah, the stream used to meander all over the place. Do you really want to open those back up? There may be major impacts to the recreation. We don't have the same amount of water. It might not, it's probably not going to work. So we need to figure out other ideas. I think that's going to be a really cool partnership between the two counties and the city, the two county funds and the city to really look at that piece.
Gary, how does any of this mimic the stuff that Mr. Bass did up in his section of river? I haven't been able to follow how that has proceeded up there, but
it's basically the same. I mean, what he did was lay down. We've done this on North Star too.
Right.
We've done projects on North Star. You're basically laying down the blank. You're adding the willow component back through wattles and live staking and all this stuff. We've worked with Randy in the past to, basically take the material from North Star, propagate it, and actually put it back on North Star. And it's similar in theory
to what they did up there.
Yeah, and it's really to hold that thing.
One of the things that they did in that section of the river that will be somewhat similar to what we're discussing, and the idea behind here is basically to replace that functional, the function of that terminal moraine to back that water up. And on that Bass stretch, what they did was they created these hardened riffles
Right.
that slowed down the river, backed it up a little bit. And so there are a number of different mechanisms you can use in that last stretch of the river before you get to Stillwater Bridge of, again, slowing that water down, backing it up a little bit. That will, besides the ecology, it's also going to help tremendously with water quality and quantity, because any siltation, sedimentation in the river, as you guys know, as the river slows down, it drops that stuff out.
There's another very important point quickly, and that is these things work in concert. If you just look at one of them without looking at the combination effect, that one may not be adequate in and of itself to work. But if you start combining bank stabilization with addressing those lateral channels and the ditches, with the replacement of this terminal moraine through systems such as a weir, through good conservation and education practices, together in concert, they have a much more likely chance of actually being effective than if you look at them piecemeal, because in isolation they may not work.
Now getting into, anyone have questions? No?
I had
And then going into
question.
the,
on that. It seems like all these things, re-wetting and working on the weir and working on the ditches and things, that the beavers are going to kind of have their way with all of this. And is that part of the solution? Is that part of the problem? It's a lot, it's not as controllable, but, I didn't see much mention of that in the report, but I would think that would be a really important element.
Well, that's one of the things that we're recommending. You see it up here on the screen is beaver protection, and I've been involved with this property for almost 20 years now, which staggers my mind. But is what I've seen is since the beavers have reestablished themselves in this region of the river, is they're not only doing what I said before in terms of creating new channels and back channels that could help the drought and also help some of the riparian vegetation, but also every time they go in and they're cutting those willow branches, and they float down the river, and then the river recedes after high water. You go in there and you find these little willow twigs that have floated up or been left behind on these gravel banks, and you pick them up a week later and they have roots in them.
Right.
And so one of the things that I've seen in the time I've been here is this natural recolonization of the river corridor by willows, and that's been helped exponentially by beaver activity. So beavers out there in this system, because as Randy said, there's all these sugary sands out there, and it's all this leftovers from long time ago. There was a lake out there, and that receded and left all that sediment behind, and so it is the woody vegetation that is holding those banks together. So the work of the beavers is going to help with both the sinuosity of the river as well as the vegetation and production in terms of habitat.
and that's one of the main pieces of the management actions for this new update, is to do a lot of that. And then,
I was picturing putting beavers to work out there too. I would actually love to see the river with all of the oxbows re-established as the main river corridor. And I think we should look at experimenting with one of them, just for starters, to see what happens. But if we put a rock structure across to raise the level and divert most of the water into one of the oxbows, the beaver are going to hear that rushing water. They're going to want to build a dam right at that rock, use the rock as the buttress for their dam.
Every few years, the beavers do try to build a dam across the river, and they usually do it in the spring. Around this time of year, they start working on it, and then once peak water flows come, it blows it
Flushes
out
it
every
up.
year. And that's, as I said, the lodges out there are bank lodges where they are below the surface water in the cut banks. And we've identified one, and I think there may be another one out there, and one of our management recommendation is to just establish a 50-foot buffer around those, so people just leave them alone and don't mess with it at all. But, and Randy and Gary can address this, but one of the hopes and one of the processes Gary was talking about, putting out a new bid proposal for this work, but a big part of that would be modeling, creating a model of the river and the fluvial geomorphology out there, determine what mechanisms and where should be placed to allow that water table to come back up. And we believe that once that water table comes back up, the river is going to continue to create its own meanders. The flatter a river gets, with the physics of it, the more it wants to meander. Just like you watch a raindrop go down your windshield, it wants to move back and forth. It only goes straight when you get a higher gradient.
Rachel?
Well, I would just say, given the time, I anticipate looking at various options and studying those fully for how we go about restoring. It may be that there's not enough water to get anywhere close to what used to happen. We don't want that. And then, on the other hand, a couple of nice meanders might be perfect, larger loops. So, there's just going to have to be a lot of research into that.
Yeah.
And I give my blessings to do that research. Is my way of looking at it. And appreciate all the work that's gone into this plan so far.
Cool. And then, so yeah, to move through it, the other natural resource parts are just what we've been doing now, is noxious weed control, step it up a little bit, because they found new species out there. One of the things we want to do is soil moisture monitoring like we do on other properties. It helps us figure out the de-wetting, but it also gives us an indication of climate change out there. And we've been working with Aspen Global Change Institute to do that. Further investigation of the fen. This is a cool piece. We should further investigate it and see if there are threats to it. Hopefully, with the cutting off of the old head gates, will actually increase it and increase those wetlands around there. And monitoring is just a huge piece. I mean, we have a huge monitoring schedule that we follow on North Star. We've been monitoring birds, we've been monitoring vegetation. We're going to continue to monitor all of that. And so, here's kind of like our maps of all the things we're going to monitor and things that we're going to look at on the property. And so you can't read any of these, but they're the bank stabilization area. And so, here are the aspen areas that we're going to be looking at, the heron areas, and working with one of the things we're going to be doing is a lot of great blue heron work. You can see all of the recommendations in there is to really investigate further the why, but also create an educational component. And that's one of the big pieces of this is going to be an educational component. And I'll get into that right after we tell you about a few of the recreation management actions.
So the recreation corridors, for the most part, everything is being carried forward just the way it was in the 2000 and 2001 plans. There's actually places where we are restricting it further. But to focus on North Star first, in the summer, the 3 access corridors are still in place and users have to stay on the trail. The beach in particular has additional rules and regs, and the whole guidance behind all of it is to try to balance the nature preserve with the recreation. And so part of that is when you are recreating in the nature preserve, encouraging users to be more quiet and respectful and pack in and pack out and all that kind of stuff. The landing zone, like Gary had mentioned before, we changed the management on that, saying open space would take on the mowing and the maintenance of the area instead of putting it back on the users. But the use numbers that were set in the current plans are carried forward, limiting the amount of landings on different days of the week. And then James H. Smith is the one where we've limited it further, where we're proposing that we remove this access completely for the public and just limit public use to the loop because of the hare enclosures and just having it become essentially, year-round closure to the public for the heronry. Looking to the winter, Nordic grooming continues. One thing in the Nordic master plan that they've had in there and would like to see is the potential for future expansion of grooming under James H. Smith. So that's what that little bubble is. We said in the future there could expand the grooming onto James H. Smith. For now, again, the winter use in James H. Smith is on the interpretive loop. And then in the plan we formally close the corridors, the 3 access corridors during winter use. And then there's also providing the room for expansion of the Nordic grooming on the east of Aspen Trail if that were to ever make sense. The next 3 actions in there about recreation are really, meant to work as a unit. The first one being that the White River National Forest owns the wildwood put-in, and we want to work with them on that because what happens there impacts what happens on North Star. So we've already done outreach with them and have a series of thoughts and future discussion to have in regards to how that put-in is managed. And then the next one is about river access corridors review and improvements. We know that in general we want to encourage less driving, we want to encourage more biking. We also need to kind of look at how the takeout at the Ped Bridge functions. It doesn't provide necessarily for the staging and the staging. There's erosion issues, and just in general, the amount of use it's seen. There's some design solutions we could take to try to create a better situation at the takeout. And so what we want to do is look at all 3 access corridors and review them and propose improvements specific to them. Again, working with the 3 actions around them. So the third one being the North Star parking area improvements. So we have 2 parking lots on the property. We want to work on improving the signage as well as bike parking and encouraging more shuttling, park your vehicle at the parking lots and shuttle to the access points with a bike. And so basically all 3 of those action items working together. One thing that Jonathan alluded to is that we don't have good data on the amount of users on the river. In the past we've had 2 different spot counts, one of which was really questionable because of the spike in numbers we saw that wasn't consistent with the counter around it. And so as part of this, for this coming year, we're getting in place permanent counters in strategically located places where they're not going to pick up and downstream traffic as well as the trail traffic and the access corridors. So trying to get better information and data on the amount of use on the river that will then help inform decisions on these 3 actions.
Can I ask a question, Steve? With that last picture with all the tubes and the equipment, those look like commercial activities. I mean, it was seems random that many people would converge at once with all the right equipment. And are they using it commercially without permits?
Yes, the answer is yes. And so this one was a wedding party. This was like the horror story that you see highlighted. So it was a wedding party that was a commercial operation that operated without a permit and did get caught and is not allowed and is something that we don't want happening and is not allowed in the plan.
Well, and that comes to the next thing is commercial use we're proposing some changes to our commercial use. And we need to work with the Forest Service because we can't have it, if we're going to work together, we got to have consistent commercial use guidelines. They don't usually just limit it to one commercial user. So we're trying to work with them on limiting the numbers of people. So it doesn't matter how many operators we have, but if you only can send out a group of 6, that's what we're proposing, you don't get what you saw in that. And it significantly limits the impact to the neighbors and to the preserve. So we're going to be working really hard with the Forest Service on coming up with a consistent commercial use permit system that we can put in place for both properties, because right now, if it goes, somebody could put those 62, if they got a commercial use permit with the Forest Service, and just find a way to get away from our property to take out, and that just doesn't work, because then it'll be a disaster somewhere else.
Or I'd hate to see 5 groups of 6.
Well,
it's really a 30-group party.
Exactly. I mean, that's the perfect thing. And special use, I mean, one of the things on special use is really, working with agencies that want to do more research on North Star. And those are the type of special uses we would want to see out there, not necessarily, we're not allowing weddings or anything else on that. And so, the biggest piece, what we're going to propose in this plan is education. We have been working with ACES on trying to create with ACES, a program like we have with the Roaring Fork Conservancy on Faloa Meadows, our other nature preserve, and to have a whole program of educational tours. We get actually a naturalist on the properties to really truly help establish this quiet zone that we're proposing around the herons here, and working with ACES to help us sign that correctly, so people realize they're coming into a special place. And so that's going to be one of the big things that we're proposing this plan, is to really step up our educational piece and use ACES instead of hiring our own employees, use an organization that is totally adept at this and has been doing it on our property for years now and decades. So, and update and replace our educational signage out there. And then one thing is that we are proposing to expand our ranger program. Our rangers are, when North Star's busy, we have no rangers out there all the time, and that may take some away from someone else. So we're going to need to explore the funding of an extra seasonal ranger to deal with that. And we'll be coming back through the budget process.
Howie?
Gary, what would the North Star experience be like if we didn't have mosquito control out there?
Oh,
It's a good question, because ever since I've been here, they've had mosquito control.
I can tell you, because I live at Smuggler Trailer Court, and when the year that they didn't have mosquito control, those mosquitoes were so big they were taking my small daughter away. It is horrendous in a very short period of time, because mosquitoes have a pretty wide range of flying space, and it's not just the
Is that a
concentration.
natural crowd control mechanism?
Actually, it's a spreader of disease,
Well, the
so
thing
the
is,
public health issue.
We worked with the mosquito control district. That head gate that's on there used to be operated by the mosquito control district, and they would drain that wetland as much as they could. So they would get less,
That
they
was
would have to
control.
spend less on mosquito control. And one of the things we worked on when I first got here was stopping that practice, because I totally was like, mosquitoes are a natural component here. What they use is environmentally safe, and I'm okay with it. So the compromise was to allow them to continue to use it. They would have to spend more money and deal with the wetlands, but do not drain those wetlands. And I think we've come up with a good thing. So last piece is really this process, as I explained at the beginning. So this is just the beginning, and if you didn't get all your comments to me, don't worry, you still have
We still have
plenty
time.
of time to get the comments to me. We're going to be going to other boards to get their comments, and then coming back to the Open Space Board on the 23rd to potentially put out one for public release.
I think we'd be remiss not to ask what the financial implications of your proposal are.
And they're all in the plan.
I see them, do you have a place where they're totalized? And there's a couple that were still pending some numbers there, or
Well,
what kind of ballpark are you looking at? And what's the time frame on that? Is that over the next 10 years, or?
one of the things I can do is I can put all of that together for the next time we get together, so you can see the total and the timing. And some of the to be determines are really, they're to be determined. We can't figure that out, but I could put that together. That's a good point. Full total.
And the funding
total
mechanisms,
funding.
because I know it's.
And like, where's the money coming from?
Yeah, that's not all open space, I don't believe.
I think another good thing for next time would be a bigger map. It's a big property, and looking at these little maps, maybe we could get a bigger
Nice.
I can
map.
print you out a bigger one.
That'd be great.
The whole spread.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the logistics. I know every one of us, we could talk for the rest of the afternoon just on this. We all have questions and comments and ideas, and what's going to be our best way moving forward to get all of those to you from our separate boards?
Well, I'm happy to, if the BOCC would like for us to come to a work session to discuss it again, we're happy to do that. And so that for me is You know, it's a good way to get all of you guys back into the same place. I mean, basically, we're not in a massive rush, because a lot of these action items, some of them, we're continuing with because they meet the original management plan, and we already have funding for some of those, so we're moving forward with some of these things. So the key is to get this right, so we're happy to do that if you guys would like to.
Yeah,
I'd like to
that's
see
my
it come
thought,
back.
to do a
Okay.
work session, and it's, the work you've done is awesome up to this point. I'm really impressed with it, and I by and large agree with the things that you're suggesting in there, and I did have questions on the costs. So I was thinking of starting to add up all those figures, but then there were the undecided ones, so
We'll break them out better for you.
and all the, like, the time schedule for implementing all the different ideas, and which ones to actually implement or not, and all
Oh, yeah.
that needs to be discussed. Would you like to do
I have
that the
another
same
4
with the
years
open
on the
space
board,
and
so I'm
trails,
sorry.
have a future meeting where
They're
you
gonna
work
get
with them just from your board?
Yeah, we'll be working on it.
Yeah, you're here, you're not
3
going anywhere.
months or whatever.
The Open Space Board is gonna get another review of this, but we can do it. I'll work with John to get a work session time so we can spend some time just with the BOCC to get their thoughts.
Because we're about 20 minutes behind schedule now, and we need a break, and then we have people waiting for an interview.
So we need to close our meeting, open space board meeting. Do I hear a,
Make that motion.
I'll second.
all in favor? Aye.
Thank you,
Thank
thanks
you.
guys.
Thank
Nice.
you, guys.
Thank you, Open
Great
Space
meeting,
and
thank you very
Trails.
much.
Thank you.
And we will take, let's take a 5-minute break forward, so we'll let everybody clear out, and so we don't get too. Okay, welcome back to our Board of County Commissioners work session on Tuesday, April 7th.
We'll do Joe first.
We have, we were meeting with the Open Space and Trails Board, and now it's just our own board. Next on our agenda are 2 citizen board interviews, and first is Lee Mulcahy, who is applying for Senior Services Council. And is
Wait,
Lee
there
still?
no. He was here and he left.
Yeah, I couldn't find them.
Well, maybe we should go ahead and have
We'll
Go with Joe first.
Go with Joe.
Joe Krabacher for I was going to change your board, the Planning and Zoning Board.
Hi, Joe.
Seniors, but
So, Joe, we always make it a point on members of the Planning and Zoning and Open Space and Trails and Healthy Rivers and Streams boards when they're up for renewal to come in and talk with us for another interview. So it's really a good opportunity for us to find out how things are going on the boards, because they're all important boards. And are there any suggestions you would make? And I know we've all had the
yeah, I didn't
opportunity
bring
of
my
reading
little
your packet.
thing that I wrote. I think I had a couple suggestions in there, but I don't know. Planning and zoning doesn't really do a lot of project reviews anymore. Most of it's master plans and long-range planning and things like that, which makes it, I don't know. Wouldn't say it's something that we need, but it's less interesting than it used to be when we did see things like 1041 site plans and so on. I guess it takes a little more brain power to deal with the long-term stuff. And for example, now I think we're dealing with, do we need changes in the growth management program? And what are those changes if we want any? How does that tie in with the TDR program? I think in the last few years we haven't seen a lot of, hardly any. I mean, Lance can probably speak to it, but I don't think we've seen any real growth management applications anymore. And, so it used to be that growth management was kind of the relief valve in terms of, the zoning that we have. And so we're going through that discussion now. I don't know, it's an interesting discussion given that we haven't seen, at least in my experience, the incredible pickup of construction activity and development activity that we've seen in the city. Fortunately, it hasn't really hit the county as much, and I think a lot of the changes that were made in the 2006 code are probably responsible for that, because generally we don't have any commercial development out there. We don't have any affordable housing projects. The only one I know of in the affordable housing category is the one that Fornell's doing out at the Airport Business Center, which is kind of an oddball because it's in the county, but it's in it's in the AABC, and there's some things that don't quite fit, as I understand, with how that's going. But I don't know. I mean, I think things are going pretty well with the Planning and Zoning Commission. We're in the process, I think, of updating some of our master plans and finishing up that process. So I don't have any great criticisms, or some of the suggestions I would have would be, probably it'd be more interesting for me personally, if we had more things to review in terms of specific projects. We don't see subdivisions anymore because there's really not much out there to be subdivided. A lot of the larger acreages in the ag programs are going through subdivision exemptions, for example. But in any event, that's my take on it.
Rachel?
Well, I'd like to just thank you for all your years of hard work on this. And although it may seem, and I can understand that, I'm a little more of a hands-on sticks and bricks person as opposed to process, but yet the process of these master plan updates are so important to those communities and the caucus areas, and laying the foundation under which future P&Zs and our boards will look at these applications. So it is foundational and work that's greatly appreciated. And I don't know that we will or won't see a pickup in applications as the economy's been improving. But you talked a little about modifying the code to allow more P&Z reviews, say the pre-2006 codes. Is that, do you mean for?
That's kind of what I was just talking about a little bit.
Yeah. And how would the code need to be modified to be able to allow that?
Well, I think most of it goes now, for example, in 1041 reviews, either it's administrative, 1041 site plan, whatever, it's administrative, or, it basically never comes to us. It goes administrative, it goes to hearing officer, or it goes to you guys, either on an appeal or on on some other basis. So we just don't see that kind of stuff. And I think that's helpful for members of the P&Z to kind of go through that analysis and understand a little bit more about what's in the code and what the constraints are and the types of things that you have to deal with. I've been around for a long time on the commission. I was off, and then I came back. I don't know if you were here last year, Steve, but I came in and interviewed last year because I stepped down. I had some family issues, and then my mother passed away, and I had some time back. So I kind of came back on, and then we now have the term limits, I guess, for board members, right?
No, we expanded the length of the terms, didn't we? But not for P&Z.
Yeah,
We all have
we have
question
none
marks.
of-
I don't think it created
no-
term
okay.
limits, but we cleaned up a lot of our boards so they all have 4-year terms
Oh, I see.
instead of 2 years and 3
Right,
years and things
right.
like that.
So that was really kind of what I was alluding to in my comments. And when you don't have, now one thing that P&Z does have authority over and does actually, subject to appeal, have the kind of final say on is growth management. But if you're new on the commission or you haven't dealt with some of the site constraints, I think it's hard to score an application because a lot of those things are you have to understand what the restrictions are, and is this really better than the code or not better than the code, nor in terms of getting points. And when you don't see those types of reviews, you just I think it's a little foreign to some people. But anyway, that was kind of the comment there.
Thank you.
So Joe, we had those issues on P&Z years ago when we weren't, growth management would come by so seldom. It was really tough to have to review anything, even when we were still looking at things in the code. It's always a challenge, but you guys do a great job with meeting those challenges. For which I want to thank you for the special events issues and how hard P&Z worked with staff and came forward with great work for the board to review, tweak a little bit, and then move forward. We will, it's my understanding, we're doing all of the caucus master plans. Those are right, all in the phases of being revised, so you'll be
I don't know,
seeing.
except Woody Creek maybe?
I think Woody Creek's doing theirs
Woody
too,
Creek's
aren't they?
doing
Woody
theirs.
Creek gonna come through?
Yeah, they're working hard at it.
Yeah, so you'll be seeing all of those. The other thing I was going to say is one of the reasons under the 2006 code that we had to do, and Lance, correct me if I'm wrong, was we were trying to address the concerns we were hearing from the public about how long the process takes and how expensive it is to jump through the hoops. So we tried to find a way to better address that, and that was the result in the 2006 code, which I know you can understand. But we could always come up with some projects, Lance, right, and throw them back at P&Z just for training. We could drag some of the old ones out of the
We
shelf.
actually don't meet very often, frankly.
That's what we've heard.
Yeah, and it might be decent to just spend some time and do some case studies.
Yeah,
Because
so
there
maybe
are a
that's
number
a
of people that are,
suggestion.
I think, somewhat new to the board.
Yeah,
And
it's always a learning process.
Yeah.
But thank you for your time. You do a great job.
Well, I used to be your age when I first started on the time.
Well, thank you. That's a huge compliment.
I spent 7 years in the city with the HBC, so I've got pushing 20 years almost on
You were just a
boards.
young lad when you came on board.
Yeah, yeah.
What color was your hair when you started?
Exactly. Scared like.
George or Michael, you want to have any?
No, thank you, Joe, I appreciate it.
Well,
George?
thank you, Joe, for your comments, and
Okay,
Appreciate it.
Great.
all right.
Thanks, Joe. Good to
Okay.
see you.
Thanks.
okay, now Lee is in the room, so we'll step back. And Lee, if you want to come up to the table up here. So Lee Mulcahy is applying for a position on the Senior Services Council. And Lee, the big question was, when you applied before, you were in the turmoil with the ski company. And it was indicated, you know, you needed to kind of resolve those issues with the ski company before we would want to consider you to be on a county board. So what could you tell what, you know, where you stand in relation to that?
First of all, I want to say thank you for allowing citizens to serve on citizen communities. I mean, that's democracy. But this is politics. Now, I just want to say, because some of you are my friends, and some of you like to throw pot shots at me, but be that as it may, it's politics, that's life. I don't take it personally. I just want to thank God for having the parents that I do. And you know about my daddy. And you know, I'm real blessed to live in Aspen, but I'm even more blessed to have a mom and dad like I do. You probably read about them in the paper.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, they taught me to serve, love your neighbor, and love your God. And you know, Aspen, sometimes we get involved in our little fights or whatever, but my parents taught me that, you know what, if you can love your neighbor, be they in Kenya or here, half the battle's won. And I'm real funny, and you know, the paper says I'm colorful, but I think that there's a very serious point in allowing me to serve. And are you and you going to allow the ski co to bully me? Because I just, you know, I don't understand when I'm delivering Meals on Wheels, doing holiday baskets, and trying to help in the community, that you guys would reject me for a citizen democracy board. I mean, that's silly. Now, to answer your question, I thought you guys were talking about the Aspen Institute. That's why we applied. Now,
I don't recall what
No,
the specific.
I'm confused.
there was a restraining order.
Well, I understand that,
That
but
went to
you're
the
here
Supreme
today
Court.
applying for the Senior Services Board,
Well,
correct?
no, I had asked him to
Oh,
explain about, you know, what's going
Oh,
on. And yeah, you did respond with the restraining order from the Aspen Institute.
So I thought that was what you wanted the resolution on, and that went to the Supreme Court,
well, yeah,
and they lost.
I'm just focusing on the Senior Services Board
Perfect.
application.
Because you're coming on this late, but the reason I was told that I was rejected
Oh,
to
see,
serve
yeah,
as an alternate.
I'm starting
Now,
fresh.
it's funny, there were like
Yeah.
6 open positions, and none of them have been filled
Okay,
for
I
2
didn't miss
years.
that loop, so.
Yeah. So, and I think really the answer, I had the privilege of going in Dallas to a very conservative think tank that brought in a very liberal author and journalist. He won the Polk Prize for journalism, the Pulitzer Prize, and they got a Academy Award for Citizen 4. His name is Glenn Greenwald. I'm sure you're all familiar with him. He used to write for The Guardian. And this is the answer to your question. When political and financial elites are shielded from any consequences for their actions, they are no longer subject to the law. Instead, they become the law's masters, using the legal system for their own purposes, to safeguard and expand their favors. It's a big word. Requisites, or I can't get that. To ensure that their cheating and corruption are not punished, but rather rewarded. you know, Lester Crown owns a ski co.
Steve?
A
I'm going to
Texan.
interrupt. We went through the same.
Let me finish.
Let me just make a statement here.
Okay.
We went through the same process last time you applied, and my remark was that this is not an opportunity for you to make a political statement. It's an opportunity for you to explain why you want to be on the Senior Service Council.
To serve my fellow man.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, can I finish?
If it's a political statement, it's not appropriate.
Well, isn't this about, why did, you rejected me because of why? Politics. So what's wrong with reading a statement from our Pulitzer Prize winning author?
I didn't reject you because of politics. And we reject
Why'd you
other
reject me?
applicants. Frankly, probably because you're trying to use this forum as a political statement.
By rejecting me, you created one.
All right, fine.
So, Lee, could you finish reading your statement? And
Thank
then
you.
we'll go around the board. Others will have
Thank
questions
you.
for you.
Thank you, Steve. To ensure that their cheating and corruption are not punished, but rather rewarded. And a Texan, a congressman, said that Lester Crown was a lying crook on the floor of Congress. So, and to keep any outsiders from challenging their superior status, the law, and this is what all the Tea Partiers and the occupiers are together on, the law, which was meant to keep the powerful in check, is now used instead to sustain and perpetuate their power. Now, you know what? I'm real sorry the fight's gone on this far, but I came to this committee and I said, guys, they banned me on the day I passed out a flyer, and we're 4 years into the process. Now, I'm going to win, because I honor my mama and daddy, but when I came to you, you declined to comment. Now, it's difficult. I know that, because I'm just one little peon. When the McCloskeys, you remember all that whole story, banned the entire public from a trail that had been used for 100 years, then you guys sided with them, because that's politics. With one person who may or may not win, and you know, I mean, I've been pro se until I had to go get a big money lawyer, and I did real well. I mean, for an idiot.
Okay, Lee, let's get back to
Okay.
the Senior Services Council.
Yeah,
and
Lee,
direct
just
our
so you
questions
know, I was looking at your application for senior services outside of anything else until you brought it into the room. And apparently, you felt you needed to bring it into the room from a previous meeting that I did not attend. So I really want to focus on why you think that you would be an asset to the Senior Services Board. Let's get over the political stances and all that stuff.
It was a political question. I answered it with a political answer.
Okay, so we're done.
Absolutely.
Please. Why do you think you would be an asset to the Senior Services Board?
Because I'm real good with people. I like to serve. You know, it makes me feel, it's why I love this community so much. Because if you serve on a team, that's community. Loving your fellow man. So that's why I'm there.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm not a meeting person, so I don't really have to go to meeting unless, because it's an alternate position, unless somebody has to go out of town or whatever.
Actually, alternates can always attend the meetings regardless, and depending upon the quorum that's present in the room, they may or may not have the opportunity to vote.
Joe, you mentioned doing the Meals on Wheels and the holiday baskets. How long have you been doing that, and how frequently? And could you kind of describe your experience doing that?
Well, I've been, as you know, I've been with my daddy for in and out of Texas for 4 months. So I haven't done anything except in Dallas-Fort Worth in regards to that. But to answer your question, 3 and 4 years, depending on the program.
So you were doing the Meals on Wheels in Texas, actually, for part of that time, or was
And
it
a life shelter, yeah.
And then have you ever done Meals on Wheels here in the Aspen area too?
Yeah, Mary calls me when somebody cancels, because I live real close to there.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other board questions?
Steve?
Yeah, Rachel?
You know, we often talk about these applications afterwards in open session. And, you know, you've brought some stuff up, so I feel it's more appropriate to say something now rather than you feel it's coming third hand later. And I have to say, I just think you bring a lot of controversy to whatever forum or activity or gathering that you're in. And I don't know that it's intentional or non-intentional, but I really cannot see putting you on this board to then create a lot of, you know, I'll say frankly, I'm a little bit of a political animal, you're a political animal, so it's very hard for you to converse without then saying somebody's a Tea Party or somebody's an Occupy. Or
Oh, I don't believe in labels. I don't believe, because it's the same thing.
Yeah, I know, but it's very hard.
It's the 1% against the 99%. So
Yeah.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah, so it's, I think that it would unnecessarily politicize a board that has significant, just regular work to do. And volunteering for deliveries on meals and things like that is really separate from serving on this board. It's not something that would inhibit you from any charity activities or public community service activities. But, you know, just again, to be to you and to your face, and it's difficult. I really recognize the passion and the desire to serve. I just don't think this is the appropriate forum, and I can't support that.
Okay, I appreciate you saying that. But I would say that that your negative vote, Rachel, because we're friends. He asked me a political question. Look, I have a great sense of humor.
I understand, but it's also within here, and you've already brought up names of other community members and your interpretation of past histories or what the county did or didn't do.
It's politics.
And that's right. And this board is not politics. This board is work, and I'm not going to interject politics into that.
Then I think that's a slap in the face of direct democracy. And it's a slap in the face of every citizen that wants to stand tall.
Okay, I accept your opinion of that.
Okay. Any other board questions?
So somebody just explained to me, we have lots of applications coming before us. We review them all at a certain time. But sometimes it takes us a week, sometimes it takes us 2 weeks, depending upon appointment opportunities for the applicants.
No problem, Patty.
Just to let you know.
You know, but I just, the last time I was rejected for this, and I love my community, and I'm blessed by God to live here. But the thing was, you made a pot shot about the restraining order after I left, which I thought was very dishonorable. The point is I'm there to serve. That's what I'm doing. And if you say, no, we don't want you as an alternate in a position that has been vacant for like, what, 4 years? Then that doesn't encourage people to stand tall and say, hey, you're being a bully. You know, I guess you recently read that article in the paper about a community member who was totally bullied by, you know, of course, the big boys in town, you know, Garfield and Hecht. That gal's being bullied.
Well, back to you in the process, just so you know, it takes us a couple weeks or so.
Yeah. Patty, we're friends. I know that. I have no problem.
Just to let you know.
So I'm disappointed about Rachel. I really am. But that, you know, that's a democracy.
Being honest.
And I hope one of you would show some cojones, because all I need is 3 votes, correct?
You know, I think this interview is over, at least for me.
Yeah, so thank you for coming in today, and we're behind schedule. We've been behind schedule for a couple of hours, so thanks for coming in, Lee, and we will get back to you for sure. Thank you. Okay, moving on, we have a review of the Independence Pass Foundation proposal for improvements to the winter gate. We have Fuller's here, the outgoing director of and longtime serving executive director of the Independence Pass Foundation.
He knows we always know where to find him, right?
This would be a good opportunity, Mark, to thank you for all the years that you have
You're very welcome.
been doing that.
It's been my pleasure.
And you're going to have some slides, so I'm going to move.
I was hiding behind the post.
Applaud your honesty.
I'm going to have somebody saying something behind my back, making it up later.
If the board doesn't need me for an introduction, I'll just step back.
And then
Steve,
Cindy
did you need
Huben
me?
representing the community development.
Right, typically you just ask for a little introduction. I just want to say that Mark Fuller and I guess Sherry Sansone are here to present the Wintergate proposal, which we talked about a little bit several weeks ago. And we'll give you a presentation. So if you don't have anything further from me, I'll just
Welcome.
Hi. My name is Mark Fuller. I'm the
guess now former director of the Independence Pass Foundation. Our current director, Karen Teague, is out of town this week, so I'm subbing in for her on this presentation, and we appreciate the opportunity to come in front of you and tell you a little bit more about this project. I've also got Sherry Sanzone with Blue Green, who did our design work. She can answer technical questions if they come up about the plan. And we've got several board members in the audience as well. This project has been in the works for almost a year and a half now. And as I outlined in my cover memo in your packet, it's been the subject of a number of meetings with stakeholders, including the Forest Service, CDOT, neighbors, East of Aspen Caucus, county staff, et cetera, to try and come up with a design that was acceptable to all parties. Basically, our motivation here is to make this entry point to the pass more user-friendly, more attractive, more informative, to give people an opportunity to learn something about where they're going or where they've been before they head up the pass. Ideally, we will have an emergency phone there. As you know, there's no cell service on the pass, and so having a 911 accessible telephone as high up as we can get it would be an important safety improvement. One of the features of the plan, as you can see in this area here in the back, that area is currently sort of a dump site for CDOT. They take their debris that they take out of the ditches on the pass and dump it into this gully back here. And in the past, this area has been completely open, and people park back there and basically squat in the area behind the rocks there. When we were there last summer, we found a good deal of debris that was obviously left over from a long-term camper. So one part of the plan is to close that off with a new gate in this location that would be opened only when that area was needed for CDOT access or for event parking. And we think that would go a long way toward eliminating that illegal use of that area for camping. The area up closer to the gate would have an informational signage that would be appropriate both for summer and winter users. The parking area would be restriped so that it was clearly marked, and the signage would be redone so that it was more consistent, more attractive, and an obvious place, for instance, for truckers to turn around if they got to that area without realizing that they were forbidden from going beyond that. The current berm that's there would be reworked and replaced by a low stone wall. I think we've got another perspective here that shows that. That's not it. So this is a view down valley from the gate area where we would take out the berm that's not very well vegetated and replace it with that little stone wall, take out the Jersey barriers that are up there by the gate, and replace them with some natural rock forms so that the area would still be available for unloading equipment and snowmobiles, but would be a good deal more attractive and would invite people to get out of their cars briefly and learn a little bit about the pass before they travel over it. So that's kind of the idea, and as I say, the design is the result of a consensus that arose from the planning meetings that we had last summer. In the last several months, we've been working with the Forest Service to get what they call a categorical exclusion which would exempt the project from any further NEPA processes. They've had their resource specialists out, botanists, wildlife people, et cetera, and we should have that categorical exclusion in hand by the end of the month, which means that as far as the Forest Service is concerned anyway, we've got a green light to move ahead. And the next step will be to do some fundraising and to do a detailed site construction plan. What we've got now is a conceptual plan, really. It's not something that we would turn over to a contractor to start work on. So we take that conceptual plan and detail it out as far as quantities and locations and so forth. And then ideally go ahead and start work later this year. So that's what we've got planned. And in terms of impacts, we don't think it's substantially different than the work that we've done elsewhere on the pass in terms of wall building, stabilization, et cetera. This is obviously aimed more at beautification and at serving the traveling public as opposed to stabilizing unsafe road cuts and that sort of thing. But we think from an impact standpoint, it's pretty similar. There may be some very minor traffic delays during construction, but given the fact that most of the work would take place off the travel surface, we don't think that those impacts would be significant or long-lasting at all. So I'll stop there and answer any questions.
Patty?
Yeah, as I think you probably read or heard, I did make a visit up there before this issue came before us at our previous meeting, and it definitely needs work, and I think the public is well aware of that. Most of that area, if not all of that entire area, is already disturbed, and it literally has been a dumping ground, and it's nice to see that the gate, which really does need to be replaced, will be replaced, and that there's a really suitable loading and unloading docking area for snowmobiles, etc. I do have two issues. Rachel brought up a great issue at our last meeting as far as having some kind of signage, measure your truck from this point to this point if you exceed that. We were thinking about doing some lineage on the road, but I think signage you could also put up if your truck is too big. Hopefully, the overall goal, I think, of that is to have people realize they're too big to go over the pass before they get to that area.
Sure.
But it's nice now that they do have somewhere to turn around so they don't say, well, I couldn't turn around, I had no choice but to go over.
Yeah.
I think that's really key.
I think that's a great idea, by the
Rachel,
way.
yeah, I'm
Could
going to
be
give Rachel
easily
full
incorporated.
credit. It's a great idea.
Yeah.
In looking at this drawing, I do have a concern for the overflow parallel parking area. Well, in the winter, it won't be probably a safety issue, but in the summer, if people think they can pull over there and get out of their cars, I'm concerned about them opening their doors, etc., onto the highway. I don't know if there's a way to prohibit that parking area to be open in the summer months and just have it as overflow in the winter. I just think there might be a safety issue for public opening their doors into traffic heading up over the pass.
Do you mean if people choose to park?
If people just
parallel
decide to
instead of
pull
head in?
over there, because it says parallel parking, and they want to go over and look at the signage on the other side of the road, and they don't want to cross the highway, they might just tend to pull over and park in that overflow parallel parking, open their doors into oncoming traffic going up the pass.
You
See
know,
what I mean?
Yeah, I think probably the best way to handle that is to delineate the travel surface real clearly through lining or painting.
Right.
And make sure that
Or it just says winter parallel parking only, or something, just to address that, so people don't just think, oh, I can pull over and park and walk across the highway. Because I think it's really only appropriately needed in the winter months, not in the summer.
Yeah.
It's just something I just want to bring to your attention.
Yeah.
And definitely summer events like Ride the Pass. But I don't think the idea was to sign it for parallel parking. Would more be a managed parking situation, and that the parking would always happen here.
On the other side, right. So just so people
Where it
in the
is
winter
now.
would know they could pull over there. Perfect. So if you don't put overflow parking, people don't obviously assume. That solves the problem.
Yeah.
Thanks. I think it's a great idea, and I think it's long overdue.
George?
Mark, I was curious about the need for that number of parking spaces. I could see in the wintertime where when the pass is closed, you actually have people that actually have to drive there, their stop, and then they're going to recreate, they're going to ski or walk or snowmobile. But in the summertime, unless this is going to be such an attraction, it's going to draw people to pull in and stop, I'm not seeing that there's a need for that many parking places.
Well, the number of parking spaces is actually less than is there now. The parking spaces that are there now aren't marked, but if you go strictly by measurement, you know, with an 11-foot wide parking spot, there's something like 26 spaces there now. So the idea is to put in this little plaza up at the top end that would allow room for people to pull in and unload equipment, but to move the parking areas down a little bit further from where they are now. So it wouldn't be a matter of, the parking wouldn't be increased is the point, it would only be marked more clearly than it is now. We wouldn't expect that those parking spaces would be even close to all used during the summer months. And during the winter months, we plan to put markings on the vertical wall to show where the parking spaces are, even if the line on the pavement is covered with snow. But the idea is mostly to control parking in the winter. And the 23 spaces that we've got, based on our counts over this winter, should be sufficient for 99% of the winter use, not to mention summer. So, you know, we think the parking numbers are about right.
Mm-hmm.
And not significantly different than what we've got now.
Have you talked to the Forest Service in terms of perhaps opening up the section of the pass earlier to at least up to Lincoln Creek to get access into that area?
We have talked to them, and we've talked to CDOT about it. CDOT is really not very happy with that prospect. They see that as making their job harder as far as getting maintenance and plowing equipment up through the Lincoln Creek area. You know, if people drive up as far as Lincoln Creek but can't go down the Lincoln Creek Road, then there's a hazard of that gate area being blocked by parkers using that upper area. We like the idea personally, but from a management standpoint, it's a challenge. And if CDOT doesn't want to do it, then we're not going to argue with them.
Michael?
Yeah, you know, when this came up initially in front of us, and still I have a, you know, the idea of fine parking, great, all that kind of stuff. But really the difficulty I have is, so this is an infrastructure improvement project that a nonprofit is taking the reins of on a state highway. I just didn't quite see how that all worked, particularly if I didn't know anything about it, being sort of one of the major infrastructure entities around. And then do we get Trout Unlimited improving parking against Highway 2 because they park there too? I mean, I just have trouble understanding this. This is a new relationship, I think, with a nonprofit, with a highway, with a major entrance to town or exit from town. So that was the problem I was having, not the particulars of the design so much, but just the conceptual parts of it.
Well, I'll make a couple of comments. One is that CDOT does not have any ownership in this area. They have an easement on the road. All the public land up there is Forest Service land. So from that standpoint, we have kind of the same relationship with the Forest Service, a little bit different, but kind of the same relationship with the Forest Service that CDOT does. You know, we're sort of custodians of the land, if you will.
When you say we, do you mean?
I mean the foundation, from a historical standpoint. But it's significantly different than where the state highway has an ownership right-of-way in terms of responsibility. During the winter months, for instance, CDOT has no responsibility up there. They plow as far as, or the county sometimes plows as far as the gate, but CDOT has no management responsibility when the road isn't being used for travel.
So does CDOT close the gate?
Yes.
They
CDOT
close the
closes
gate,
and then they're
even
gone.
though they have an easement. So they closed the gate to their easement, is that
Yes.
what you're saying?
Yes. And the point, the larger point is that everything off the travel surface is Forest Service land. So technically, we're not doing anything with CDOT. Everything we're doing is on Forest Service property. And the other point I would make is that although this is certainly closer to town and maybe a little more dramatic improvement than some that we've made elsewhere, it's not substantially different than a lot of infrastructure improvements we've made elsewhere on the pass. We've done roadside areas and signage and parking pull-offs and those kinds of things, obviously on a much smaller scale, but kind of the same idea, making things more attractive or more useful to the traveling public for 20 years. So, we don't see it as being different in scale, but not in other respects than projects we've been doing for a long time.
Yeah, I guess your relationship to the Forest Service, none of that was clear at our last meeting. And I still don't quite get why the Forest Service, I just don't quite understand them.
Well, what it boils down to, Michael, is that if we don't do it, it won't get done.
Well,
Let's have John step in here first.
So just, I think to this end, on behalf of county staff, I apologize to the board and to the Independence Pass Foundation, because I do think the foundation had reached out to staff at different levels on this. I think we, probably 98, maybe 95% of the time, we get how to navigate these kinds of issues and when to bring these things in front of you. I think we were looking at it as Mark described, that this was not, it was a difference in scale, but wasn't substantially different from other projects that the Independence Pass Foundation had done and maybe visited with us about in the past in a similar matter. So we kind of missed, Michael, I think, on understanding that this one needed to come back, because the foundation did reach out to staff at least two different touch points with the county. And so I think we are stepping back and evaluating, okay, that was a good learning experience for us. It was not, I think, as clear, because this was a Forest Service process that we were involved in, kind of in a tertiary manner. The Independence Pass Foundation was exercising their mission, I think, independently, as they have on other projects. So just for that level of confusion, I think we'll be more sensitive to that going forward. So just apologize to both sides for the confusion there. Usually we know when to navigate those things.
Rachel?
Yeah, thank you for the explanation, John, and it was a little awkward in terms of how it came to us, but I really applaud the work of Independence Pass Foundation for all these years, and I do think of the work you've done as being infrastructure projects on the highway, literally, whether it was fencing that's been installed so people don't spill off into the river, or creating that grottos parking area and the other parking area. I remember walking those areas with Bob Lewis back in the day, and he said, well, if we just cut the road here and move it over there, we can do this, and get rid of dangerous kind of off-shoulder, on-lane parking that was occurring up there. So there's been a lot, and we depend on these sort of volunteer organizations. When you look at Roaring Fork Outdoor Volunteers, whether they're working on our trails on Forest Service land, or we're working on other trails, and we've all talked about the poor Forest Service budget cuts. It was down 35% in the past 3-5 years, something even more. So there's a lot of projects that they're not going to get to that they'd like to do, that they have a huge wish list of infrastructure and campsite improvements that they're just unfortunately not getting that federal funding for. So I think we've clearly become more and more dependent on citizen volunteers, and whether that's been people in Maroon Bells who are just acting as a guide, you know, and I'm not even sure what the name of that group is because it's gotten merged in these different nonprofits, but I love to see this type of partnership. And if it was up to us as the county, I don't think it would have been something that rose to the top of the list the way it should have. We're still dealing with subsidence on roads and potholes in areas, and we've done a lot of our major spending that is going to occur on roads already over the past few years, doing the Airport Business Center and the Frying Pan, and we've all know, you know, we spent the money while you could get the contracts kind of low and take care of some lingering problems, but we don't have an ambitious going forward roads program, and again, should we, it would probably be more urbanized areas and not necessarily to pass. So I appreciate greatly you stepping into what I consider to be a void there of both resources on our side and time and commitments. I know it is put in the bottom of the memo that you're hoping to do fundraising. You've secured some fundraising and pursuing other grants as they're available. Well, we don't have a big placeholder for this, and I think that was a little bit of the concern, is like, are these guys going to get this project approved and then put it on our laps and say, here's a $500,000 project ready to go, it's on, just bring in the money, we got it approved for you, or would we build false expectations with the Forest Service that this was going to happen right away, or how it would be phased in. But I would like to say I can see certainly committing some amount of local funding to this project, whether it's a 5% or a 10% of the total cost out of our budget, so that you are much more successful obtaining those grants when you have some local match money, if it's 5% in or 10% in or something like that. I don't want to undercut your fundraising efforts, but you know, it's something that I know that how state grants go and federal grants go, and they want to see the local county participating. But, you know, separate from all that, if you look through the budgets of the city of Aspen for the past 10, 15 years and the county, we've always contributed to Independence Pass Foundation, knowing that this was one of the entrances to our town, the summer entrance. And I know that the city had plans for whether it was an information kiosk or how to tell people where to park when they get to town, or somehow to intercept traffic on that east end. And it's never come to any sort of real fruition. But this creates a lot more of those opportunities for really educating and informing the guests where they want to go from there. So I'm all for it, and I really appreciate the work.
George?
So following up on that, the Independence Pass Foundation received a grant from the Health and Community Fund,
Yes.
I think every year.
Yes.
So this project's probably not going to start till next year at the earliest.
It depends on how our fundraising goes.
But if it were to be going into the next year, then you could apply to the Health and Community Fund as to help fund at least part of this. Or no, it wouldn't quite qualify?
I think we need to look at that. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how it would fit into the four squares of that fund.
Mark, the other, you probably have followed up on this, but because the Independence Pass has now been designated nationally as a National Scenic Byways, they have grants?
Well, the National Scenic Byway Program has gone the way of a lot of federal programs, in that a lot of their funding has been redirected. The fact that we're a National Scenic Byway sort of gets us in the door to some grant programs, but they're usually through the Federal Highway Administration. And as far as the fundraising goes, you know, 90%, I think, of the money that we've raised to do all of our projects has been through private donations. And we don't expect this to be any different. Not only that, but most of the projects that we've done in the past that are of this scale have been phased. And this project is very accessible to a phased approach, where we would do some elements of it this year and maybe spend a couple of years raising money and come back and do a couple of more elements, and maybe take, you know, 3 to 6 years to complete the entire project. At this point, we do expect the funding of this to take the same pattern as the funding of the walls that we built and, you know, the various other projects that we've done, for it to be largely through private donations, through grant funding as opportunities arise. We really appreciate Rachel's expression of interest in helping to provide matching money. And if those kinds of opportunities arise, we would certainly come back to you either by way of the Healthy Communities Fund or through some other appropriation. We're going to be counting on our private donors who've been very supportive and generous in our previous projects to get us off to a good start here.
Okay, Bob Wade in the audience had his hand up, and I believe you're a board member from the
Yes, I am.
foundation. Would you like to speak now, briefly?
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Steve. I just wanted to clarify, particularly for Michael, that we've come in the past, 20 years ago on the top cut walls, seeing a need. We've identified ourselves as stewards of the past. Maybe you've got the mission statement. I was going to read it. But yeah, I think this is relevant. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Boots Ferguson, and I'm also a board member. And the Independence Past Foundation's mission statement is: the mission of the Independence Past Foundation is to promote and protect the ecological, historical, and aesthetic integrity of the Independence Past corridor, and to encourage enjoyment, safety, and appreciation of the past. Founded in 1989, the Independence Past Foundation works in partnership with the U.S. Forest Service, Colorado Department of Transportation, City of Aspen, Colorado Department of Corrections, and Pitkin County to accomplish its mission and some specific visions and goals.
So, particularly when Bob got that upper cut started, we saw a need, but we felt that we needed to be the catalyzing group to pull all these stakeholders, if you will, together. And that has continued. The restrooms up on top of the pass is another example of that. Dee Malone was on our board, did some water quality surveys, saw that there was a real need to have an interim bathroom up there, and we put together a project not just with us, but again with stakeholders, CDOT, Forest Service, and so that's how we see ourselves moving forward with this. We're trying to pull groups together. In this particular case, we're trying to fund it through our traditional means because we realize the Forest Service doesn't have any money. CDOT does not have any money. And, you know, maybe we can approach the county, but that wasn't the original intent. I think you know that from Mark's letter that we've got $111,000 put forward out of about a $450,000 budget from us so far. So we have skin in the game. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Bob. We are running late on our agenda, and I think that leave it to your board. Do you want to hear more comments from public members?
Well, I think they came.
Yeah.
If it's really short.
Yeah, if we could limit, because we are running behind, make it quick.
Ruth Harrison. I kind of agree with somewhat of what Michael says. Personally, I don't see a need for it at all. I do not consider that the entrance to the pass. I consider it difficult, the entrance to the pass. There is an emergency phone there. I believe that Hunter Creek has been ruined with all the signs up there. There's huge signs all over the place. Next they'll have a bar and a restaurant up there. The parking spaces have not been a problem. I see absolutely no need for parking spaces designated. It literally has not been a problem. I don't even think people notice that area once the pass is open because it's not a specific spot for people to stop. There's no reason to stop. I think we want to make everything pretty, and I think we should just leave some stuff as it is. The trucks, there's a huge sign that says turn around. I mean, If they can't see that, nothing's gonna make a difference. If they wanna put a gate to stop people from driving in and doing the camping thing, you know, fine, I don't even see a need. I don't see a need for that. I just have a hard time with the whole thing. I don't think everything has to be touched by us. And what has been touched there, so just leave it, you know? It's, like I said, in the winter, it's the locals who are up there, and in the summer, people don't stop there. They just keep going.
Okay, thank you. And one more
Steve
comment.
Boots Ferguson, and I'm on the board of the Independence Pass Foundation. 2 quick points. One, Michael, the relationship that we have with the county is not new. It's 26 years old, and perhaps older than that based on the efforts of Bob Lewis. And so this is not something new. The reason a nonprofit is involved is because that's how things are happening. And these days, we've heard everything from government to suggest that the citizens of the community participate in a more effective way. To Ruth's point, I think when you have an eyesore, why leave it an eyesore? This is not a natural area of disturbance. This is something that we have done. This is something CDOT's done, something we have perpetuated. It's a butt-ugly parking lot. There is no reason for us to sustain a parking lot in a dump that CDOT has views in its rearview mirror. We think it can be a community resource, and that's what we hope to do.
In regard to what Boots said, in regard to what Boots said,
Ruth?
well, I just have to respond to that. As far as cleaning up that area to make it not, quote, not ugly or more attractive, I don't have a problem with that. But I do have a problem with all the signs, with designated parking, as far as getting rid of some of that cement and filling in the hole, the ditch in the back, and all that, and you want to put grass down or whatever, tree, whatever, that's great. But doing all the other stuff, signs and this and that, and to me is completely unnecessary.
Okay, thank you, Ruth.
Thanks, Ruth.
And we do need to move on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Good to see you.
Thank you very much for the presentation, and
Thank you.
She's described as the city's been doing.
What's that? Okay, moving on, and we're running almost 15 minutes down.
Thank you, Patty.
Thanks, Ruth.
And
Yeah,
we
no
are-
problem, Ruth.
Hopefully we can catch up at some point before we run into the city council meeting, so we get a break then.
Okay.
So we'll be talking about broadband Phase 1 presentation.
So they're on the other side of the door that everyone's going out of right now, so.
And they have a PowerPoint, so let's do this.
Okay. Can I ask you then, in the interim, there's a broadband meeting coming up in Vail, Steve was telling me about?
Kara, come right up to the front here. You're on.
Will you let me know? Should it something I might want to go to, or we'll talk about it?
Karen and I are
I know, I was just wanting to get my brain clued in. That makes me want to go even more if the two of you are going. We just had people coming and going today.
I know.
You're getting stuck in that revolving door. Been an interesting day. Thanks, Steve.
Hello. I have
Advantage Engineers is here to give you guys a broadband update. They are the ones that are initiating phase 1, so the needs assessment and financial model. I know I was before you guys a couple weeks ago, but now that they're here, they're doing some stakeholder interviews. We wanted them to give kind of an entire layout of what they're going to be doing in phase 1. So I have Lori Sherwood here, who's our project manager with Advantage Engineers, and she's brought her team and let her kind of guide the discussion or the presentation.
Okay, hi, good afternoon.
Kara, could you introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry, I'm Kara Silvernagel, Hickman County.
Good afternoon, I'm Lori Sherwood. I'm the Director of Business Development with Advantage Engineers and the project manager or program manager for this project. And also with me today are Joanne Hovis, the President of CTC Technology and Energy, and Doug Adams with Think Agency. And we'll have them say a few words in a few minutes about what their role is in this project, a little bit about their company. And so first, just a little bit about us. So Advantage Engineers, we've had a legacy company since 2001. The name Advantage Engineers has been around since 2010. We have over 190 folks in our offices now, and as you see, we have 3 main divisions, and we can get to that in a moment. We've been recognized as one of the fastest growing engineering firms in the country. So we have, our current offices are primarily in the Middle Atlantic, but we are looking at expansion, and we have a couple locations that we're expanding to. Richmond, Virginia, New York Metro, and Broomfield, Colorado, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which actually Pittsburgh opened, I think, 2 days ago. So we'll need to update that slide. We have telecom services is what our primary business is. We do engineering of all kinds, program management, construction management, tower work, wireless, fiber, anything within the realm of telecommunications and engineering. And some of our projects within civil, structural, environmental engineering, inspection, and geotechnical. We have 2 other divisions. We have environmental services and geotechnical. And these are just some of the types of projects and disciplines that we work on within those as well. So why us? So we approached this, we saw the RFP that the county issued, we were very excited about it. And working with our partners, we knew we could put together a team that could approach your needs and work with you all in providing the right solution for Pitkin County. And so for this project, we brought together CTC Technology and Energy, Think Agency, Affinity, and Kissinger and Feldman. Joanne, if you'd like to come up and say a few words about your company.
Thank you. I'm Joanne Hovis. Thank you. I'm president of CTC Technology and Energy. We're a public sector consulting firm. We work all over the United States, including for many of the Tier 1 cities, many counties, small towns, small villages, a wide range of different public entities and states on broadband planning. And what we do is high-level, system-level design, not the kind of detailed engineering that Lori's team does. We're much more of the cost estimation and high-level. Those are the inputs to business planning that we do, and then we do market research and market evaluation, and those are the other set of inputs to the business plan. So our role on the project is just putting together some business planning, assessing the market, including some statistically valid market surveys of your broader community in terms of what the demand is for broadband services that's not currently being met, and better understanding that, and then putting that together into a broader financial plan that includes cost estimates and revenue projections. And as I said, we do this all over the country, and we've been doing it for 20 years. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And as part of our team, we felt it was important to involve local businesses, local Colorado businesses as well. And Doug is here with Think Agency.
Hi everyone, my name is Doug Adams. I founded Think Agency in 2010. Most of what we do is within the technology space. We're a small firm with anyone who touches anything has between 5 to 10 years experience at least. We work with PR, messaging, websites, digital programs, And we've done a lot of projects on broadband and rolling out broadband networks throughout the United States, including in Northeast Ohio, Seattle, Chicago. We've also done some work statewide in Arkansas and Nebraska.
And two of our partners who are not able to be here today is Affinity, and they are a managed services network provider. They do some other things as well. They have fiber and wireless networks that span over 50,000 square miles in 7 states. And Affinity is working, has a relationship with EagleNet in Colorado, is assisting them in managing their network. And it is part of their fiber that we will be utilizing as some of the backhaul. We anticipate that comes up to Glenwood Springs and bringing it into the valley here. Ken Fellman, with Kissinger and Fellman. Ken, it's hard to describe Ken in a few words. He's a friend and a colleague, and there is no one better to do what he does in his field. They're a Denver law firm, and he is actively engaged in Colorado issues with local and state issues, federal issues. He's serves as on the Intergovernmental Advisory Committee for the FCC. He's very active in Washington, D.C. in the telecommunications space, and we're privileged to have him as part of our team. So this is the meat of why we're here today, is the Pickens County project plan and what we're doing. And so one of the things that we have done is our team has experience, as you've heard, in doing this in multiple communities and different projects. And my personal background is I was the director of the One Maryland, what we call ICBN initiative, which was a stimulus-funded fiber deployment in Maryland. That was a $115 million federal fund that we spent about 1.5 years developing and then 3 years building as part of the federal project. And at the end of that 3 years, we completed 1,500 miles of fiber and 1,065 anchor institutions were connected. And it was a really exciting initiative that brought together stakeholders and community networks, and kind of just tried to bring as much together as we could to help with broadband deployment and broadband access in the state of Maryland. So for this program here, which is kind of a little bit smaller version of what we did in Maryland, I think, because it involves interviewing the stakeholders, doing the surveys, and so the first piece of this is this needs assessment phase, although needs assessment isn't really the right terminology because we know there's a need, and we know you've assessed there's a need. It's really making sure that we have all the information we need to design the best network possible so that when you get to the next phase, the engineering and the construction, we can implement that without a hitch. It's the networks get into trouble when they don't do this due diligence phase before they start the engineering and the building. You have to know where the assets are that you're working with, the partners that are going to be coming into the network, what you plan to do with it at the end of the day. All of those things go into the design. And so I'll kick it over to Joanne to say a few words about the survey and then the process.
Okay, thank you. You know, as I think I briefly touched on, so forgive me if I'm repeating myself, the first thing we're doing is we're collecting data to understand your market and where the unmet market needs are. Where are there currently services? How are the consumers in the broader county, that's the residential consumers, how are they experiencing broadband services? Are they getting the service they want? Are they paying the prices they want? Are they getting the reliability they want? And what do they see as the gaps? And then what is their interest in paying for a more robust and different set of services that potentially would be built as part of this broader project? So we have out right now written surveys that were mailed to a couple thousand homes within the county, a few thousand homes. We will get statistically valid data out of that, and we will then do a full market assessment and statistical analysis of where the market opportunity is for video services, data services, and voice services, but with a focus on data that is internet as opposed to entertainment services, which is what video is. Trying to understand what's the unmet need here in the market. You all know there's a need, you hear it from your constituents all the time. Everywhere I go, anywhere in the United States, I hear that from elected officials. What we're trying to do is develop quantitative data so that we really understand what the potential market is in terms of revenues for a network that you might deploy. And then all of that data gets fed into the financial models that we will develop. We will assess what the range of potential public-private partnerships is and who the private partners in this market and more broadly throughout Colorado might be in terms of helping you to reduce costs and share some risk. And then we'll develop some financial modeling around a range of ways of looking at that. And then collaboratively with Lori's engineering team, we'll develop the cost inputs to the model. And Lori's team is looking at things like, where does there need to be fiber? Where will wireless work best? What's most cost effective? And so on. And then working with my team in looking at what the electronics needs are to make all of that infrastructure work. Those are the cost inputs. We have revenue inputs from the market survey, and then we'll develop the financial models to present to you. And those models will give you a really good sense of what the opportunity is and where the risks are. And frankly, that's a big part of the focus here. I will say I think we all are very strong proponents of more and better broadband everywhere. As a nation, we need it. As communities, we need it. But we approach the project from the standpoint of helping you to understand what it really entails and what your risk is so that you know what you're getting into as you go down this road. You know what the business model is, you know where your partners bring value to the table, but where that risk is sitting, frankly, squarely with the public sector here in Pitkin County. And that's the approach to the financial modeling and business planning.
And one thing additional, Joanne, is that the modeling that we're working on and the interviews with the stakeholders will also help us identify additional funders, potential private funders and public funding on a federal level, state level, wherever we can identify the opportunities. And there's significant opportunities in Washington right now in grants that may be available as part of this.
In the most remote parts of the county, we think that there's a funding opportunity that will open third quarter of this year from the FCC to fund broadband expansion in the most remote and unserved areas. And what we're anticipating is that some of that funding at least will be made available on a competitive basis to counties, cities, towns, competitive providers, and so on. In the past, it's been limited only to incumbent phone companies. And the FCC is trying to open it up for competition. So we're very hopeful that that might be a source of revenue that would help to make the business plan work here. But I'll be frank that what we don't have coming out of Washington is the kind of really robust, really generous grant program that Lori and her colleagues made the most of 5 years ago. It was a unique moment, the Recovery Act, and the nation was in a very different place. I'm glad we're not there anymore, but it led to a certain kind of funding that's not necessarily available anymore. That said, there are funding sources, and we'll look at all of them as part of the plan.
And some of those lessons learned from those projects we know is that in Maryland we're busy, communities that have the infrastructure, they're busy adding on to it, extending the network. There are last mile residential projects that are utilizing the network that we put in that are now popping up. And so the middle mile infrastructure is really the critical piece here as kind of the driver of all of the next phases. And that's something else that we will also build into the plan, is not just the holistic view, but also possibly a phased approach, so that you can see, long term what the steps 1 through 10 will be in order to bring the service to all the areas in the county, in the region.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
First of all, and I'm just starting to get into this FirstNet issue. Is there any opportunity to work with that if we were lucky enough to get some kind of a federal grant to look at FirstNet broadband service for public safety? Could we utilize these two issues together in any way, shape, or form? Or, as I know it's a dedicated system, but...
Until a month ago, I would have said that FirstNet presented a really strong opportunity. FirstNet is the federally funded wireless public safety national broadband network. And Congress allocated $7 billion for deployment of FirstNet, and it's being deployed by an independent board and staff working in partnership with the Department of Commerce. And one of the things that they were looking at very seriously for the last 3 years was how they could leverage state and local assets and resources, including fiber and other kinds of opportunities. And what the legislation said was that they should take that into account and do it wherever economically feasible. I think, based on my experience over the past month and the conversations in Washington, that the FirstNet staff and board has decided that it's just too complex and too difficult to use public resources at the local level. On a national basis, it's going to involve an enormous amount of work.
And it's pretty much in chaos right now.
Yes and no. And last 2 weeks ago, I was actually at the International Wireless Exposition, which was a heavy FirstNet focus. And in fact, Ed Mills, the FirstNet outreach manager for the state of Colorado, and Nate Wallowitz were there with me, and both were speaking on panels. And we were discussing sort of the Colorado piece of this, and you have a great team here for the state that's involved and engaged with FirstNet. And they are actively pursuing all the the avenues that they can. They've done the consultations. They're moving into the phase 2 of the funding, which is kind of their planning money that is being implemented to do this inventory of systems and things in the state. And so I don't know, as Joanne said, that there will be any grant opportunities that come filter down to this level, but FirstNet is an important consideration in that the network that we designed will take into consideration FirstNet needs.
So I might be able to, and I work with Nate as part of Northwest Colorado Council of Governments, but to be really quick, because I know we have time limits, the other opportunity is that because of our involvement with Northwest Colorado Council of Governments, we are now part of an economic development district, federal economic. And so I don't know what kind of grant opportunities there may be regarding broadband through that. It's just something that I just wanted to bring to your attention, because Pickens County's never really been able to utilize our involvement with an EDD.
And that's a good point. I mean, typically you do see some different avenues for grant potential in the federal level. Department of Homeland Security sometimes has grant programs for networks. You have the FirstNet, you have other locations, and so that may be an avenue.
Well, we get very creative up here in the middle of the Rocky Mountains. We need to keep all those doors open.
We're a strong team, but my role is frequently being the buzzkill. I'm really sorry.
No, we like that information up front.
And I think that there's planning, grant funding available through a variety of mechanisms. There are opportunities, like there's one open in the Economic Development Administration in the Department of Commerce at the moment. But the really big, robust grant programs we don't see them today in the way that we might have in the past. You all know what is going on in Washington in terms of any kind of fight over funding. And I think FirstNet is going to be very important for delivering public safety services here. But my personal take on how FirstNet staff is thinking about this is that they are seeing the state stakeholders, including your very capable state team here, and local stakeholders as customers, not as partners or providers of infrastructure or places that they might be sending funding. So they're saying explicitly now they might consider using state and local assets if it's free. So that doesn't work for the business model we're trying to develop here. The way it may play into the business model is, what I anticipate FirstNet will do is it will give a series of awards to a series of private companies, most likely. That might be the local, the major national mobile broadband companies, and they could then become customers on your network if you have fiber going to key towers and other sites that they care about. But in terms of FirstNet decision making itself, I think FirstNet has just said, too complicated, we can't do it. And that's how they define not economically feasible. Again, I don't mean to be a buzzkill, although that is frequently my role. It doesn't mean there's not a viable business model.
We like a challenge.
Okay. That's great to know.
Okay, George?
Thank you.
Maybe you know or feel this. I know that Colorado, through the Department of Local Affairs, just recently came up with a substantial grant dollars that was generated from oil and gas severance monies. It was really substantial. So how's that all?
So George, it's funny because during open discussion, we're going to be talking about adding a resolution tomorrow to support us applying for $150,000 in grant funds to support our engineering and design portion of this project. And so we're on a short timeline. That was not included in your packet. We have it noticed as an informal resolution. But during open discussion, we're going to talk about a formal resolution. So we're on top of that. We hope to be one of the first public entities to take advantage of that.
Northwest Cog did get DOLA grant monies for Nate's position, and they just applied again for a 2-year expansion of that, which is a great opportunity for us to have Nate over there.
Rachel?
Yeah, I think it was a previous memo, but I'm just kind of wondering, what is this level of this amount of work costing? That I think we've already gone forward because the surveys are out in the mail and I actually got one. And the other is, can you explain why you need 5 different companies on your team?
Well, you know, it's, I think part of it is because you want to make sure that we have all the right pieces, all the right avenues, the expertise. So you've heard from Joanne and Doug. Doug's company, it's important to have a communications expert on the team to help us with making sure we have the right talking points and we're communicating the right message to the stakeholders, particularly as we go through this process and the residents as we move through the end of phase 1 and move into phase 2 and 3. To get the right communications and marketing components to make this successful. Affinity is a necessary partner because they bring the hardware. They have the network management experience and services that they're going to be providing so that the network is managed and run at the end of the day. And they have relationships also with last mile partners that we're going to look to leverage and bring in as well. And then Kissinger and Fellman, well, you know, there's a few of us here who are attorneys. We don't do it full time. But, you know, it's always good to have someone on your team who can understand, particularly in Colorado where you have challenges with state legislation and SB 152 and you have you know, franchise agreements and things that need to be looked at. So that's why we have the team that we have for this project.
And the cost is $143 for this first round. So.
And if I could add on to that, I think one of the things from staff's perspective that we learned is we started this project, and to be clear, where we started this, we set this as a goal in 2012 when the county didn't even have its own network or IT department or any of those things, none of that expertise in-house. And so we have been building that, and we started a project where we, you know, looked at cell as potentially being our low-hanging fruit to extend both cellular service and at least internet service through cell. And I think one of the things that we learned as an outcome of that is we collected a lot of great data, and we hope that data will help us with design going forward, but that there was a lot of convergence of different technologies that we also needed to be understanding, whether it be fiber, cellular, DAS, all kinds of different silos, if you will, of technologies that even within the same firms, we, as you may recall, did an RFP with the ski company and started working with American Towers. They don't even talk within their own business between those different kinds of technologies. And so we found that what we really wanted this time was to have a comprehensive team so that we knew how to connect from the fiber, and I'm probably not even using the right term still, but say from hardwire to wireless to cellular, how those different technologies might be integrated to most efficiently and effectively deploy a network. Then on top of that, we had no idea really, so what is a viable business model? How do we know when we're negotiating a good deal in terms of private-public partnerships? So we needed that level of business expertise. And then we recognized through our early studies that we are in a very, very dynamic policy environment, both in terms of whether it be funding opportunities coming and going, as it were, our own regulatory environments that we're operating in. And so we felt that if we were going to come back to you with a viable plan and a plan that we felt we could explain to you from a cost, benefit, and risk perspective, that we needed to take all of these perspectives into account. And so we paid attention to that when we made this selection, because we tried to go down a narrower path early on to try and identify low-hanging fruit. And that strategy didn't get us where we wanted to be. And what we learned there, we need this comprehensive look. We need to be able to come to you and say, here's how all the dots connect. And that was expertise we didn't have in-house.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great stuff.
Well, thank you very much. Just a practicality question. Anybody who would be receiving the mailed questionnaire should have gotten it by now? And then what's their deadline for getting it back?
They can return it by April 24th, and every survey came with a self-addressed and stamped envelope to return it in. So they can just complete it and put it back in the mail by April 24th, or sooner.
Okay, and then
Sooner the better.
everybody else has the opportunity to go on the website and fill out the short questionnaire.
It's happening.
Visit Pitkin County Connect, and even if you do get a survey, we'd still, because it's a little bit of a different question, so if you still want to respond, just because you
Okay,
have
they
no
could do
survey.
both.
Yep, absolutely.
Great.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate meeting all of you.
Very good.
Okay, moving on to memos of interest. Thank you. Memos of interest, and first we have
Thanks a lot.
Colorado Community Response Budget Supplemental with Nan Sundin.
Hi. Should we wait for Betty, or you want to just get going?
Okay,
Want me to start? Okay,
lead the way,
so,
Nan.
Good afternoon, I'm Nan Sundin, I'm the Health and Human Services Director, and I'm Connie Garofalo, our wizard, and Kim Dubois, the Adult and Family Services Manager, with me today. We have two supplementals to present to you. The first is the Colorado Community Response Program, and so I'll present a little, and then we can answer questions. I know we have just a little bit of time, so we're trying to eke in. So in 2013, the governor unveiled his Keeping Kids Safe and Families Healthy 2.0 plan, and that was really an effort to move state money to the front end of serving families in prevention services so that our child welfare caseloads were not growing. And so there have been several programs that we've rolled out, and one that we have a new opportunity for, which is the Colorado Community Response Program. They call it CCR, so if I fall back to that, I apologize, because the words don't mean much. Basically, the Colorado Community Response Program is a program where we are allowed to provide or offer services to families that are at risk, who are not on the caseload of child welfare, but maybe have been referred or have been assessed and the case was closed because there was no finding. And the family is invited to participate voluntarily in services that may help them meet some of their goals. So basically what it is funding that we can provide to families who may be at high risk. Eagle County applied for a Colorado Community Response grant 2 years ago and got it. And part of their grant plan was that they would expand to Eagle and Pitkin County after the first year. So they developed their program on the Eagle side last year, and they invited Pitkin and Garfield to expand the program to our communities I guess the invitation sort of started in July. So really for the last 8 months, we've been trying to work with our good dear neighbors, Garfield County, and they've been trying to work with us around how would we make this program work in our region from Aspen to Parachute. And after many meetings and many discussions and many discussions even with our community partners, both Garfield and Pitkin came to the conclusion that we really need to do this separately, that the region is too big. This is a very intimate experience with families. We don't have a provider up in Aspen who can do this service. They don't have a provider in Rifle, Newcastle, and Parachute, and that's really where they need the services the most. So we happily had a meeting last week with the state where we told them we really wanted to do this separately, and they embraced this concept. They're happy. They want more counties to do Colorado Community Response. And so our proposal for Pitkin County, and the one that's in here, is that we have $2,015 that we need to spend by July 1st, June 30th. And we have approximately $32,500 to spend. And Garfield has the same. And our proposal for Pitkin is that we hire a consultant, a woman who started the Basalt Family Resource Center, and bring her in to start seeing families, but mainly to assess how would we start a program like a family resource center here in Aspen. Could these, would we be able to have a Colorado Community Response person there? Would that person be the family resource center? What do we need from the schools? And what would a long-term sort of business plan be for this model to be successful? And we've been very excited that the schools Aspen School District, in particular Julia Rourke and some of the principals and the counselors, are very interested in having a family support person in the schools. They're at a place where they're finding that it's difficult for them, the pace of the school day and what's happening with the kids and how busy everyone is. They're having trouble making referrals to parents and finding if parents can follow through with community support services for their children or for their families. And so they are more open today than they've ever been in the time that I've been in my position to having us potentially place someone in the schools to help with families and children, and ultimately to help the children be successful. So that was a quick framework. It's 100% funded by the state, and we are looking at this next 3 months drawing down $32,000 to pay for the consultant and to start doing the work. And then we would apply for 2016, which we're guaranteed funding, and we just need to present to them about how many families we're going to serve. They'll tell us how much money that is. They have established about $3,000 per family. So the most that a county can get is $150,000. We wouldn't be getting that much, but if we saw 30 families next year, we could be looking somewhere around 80 to 90,000 of revenue.
Rachel?
Well, I want to thank you for your work behind the scenes for so long, trying to see if there was a regional program that would work. And I understand why there's not. And, perhaps over time, when the two programs are up and running independently, there'll be more cross-fertilization, ability to work together. By way of background, we're somewhat fortunate in our community, and we haven't had the horror story cases that you have seen over the years coming out of some of the more populous Front Range communities, and even some of the rural communities were resulting in child death and real maltreatment and abuse. And so the state has been trying to find new and better ways to respond constantly. I think that for me, one of the important parts of the memo, I'll just read it for the public, In Colorado, approximately 55% of child welfare referrals are screened out after an investigation following a report of abuse or neglect. Yet research shows that while a safety risk may not be currently present, families screened out are still at high risk for re-referral to the child welfare system and future incidences of maltreatment. And I think that that's just a pivotal point, because very often in these cases in the Front Range and in other communities, it's been, well, they had contact with the family here and they got up to a certain point, and then we didn't hear from them again in the system until there really is a horrible outcome. And so being able to offer on a voluntary basis, these folks have been screened out, but yet if we can help with the support of your family going further, I think it's great. And that's what these funds are available for through the state, so I appreciate you finding a good way for us to utilize them, and I support going forward with this program.
I'd like to hear back too, after this first couple of months, how the families responded to this. Was there a fear of being caught into the government system and never being able to get out, or being labeled, or having a file created? And that's a fear factor in a lot of families when, you know, social services knocks on their door. So I think that would be interesting to find out what kind of response you get back from the families. And if that's an issue, how we can better that over the next year.
That's a good point.
Can I just respond? And just in terms of the implementation, they really want it to be a community-based program that we would act as a fiscal agent. I mean, I don't know what the recommendations will be from the assessment, but for that very reason that you're talking about, we really want to support families.
Right.
And try to support people at the front end so that they don't have to be involved with us, so.
Right, I just think that's
Hopefully
important.
Yeah.
The image of Child Protective Services is changing because of these prevention dollars and our focus on keeping families safe and strong together. So, but
in other words,
we will definitely
fending it off rather than fending it after.
Yeah,
right. Yeah. Does that make sense? Perfect. Thank you.
No, I think you articulated well. We just really want to support families. We don't afraid to be involved.
So does this come back to us at another time, or was this it?
So what will happen is we collect these, the board gives the nod to these supplementals, and then we collect them into a resolution, a formal resolution, usually quarterly.
So I think we're nodding.
Everybody thumbs up.
Unanimous nod. Excellent.
They're just nodding.
Yeah. Did you catch which way they were nodding?
Yeah. Depends on the direction of the nod.
So then, the second is also an amazing opportunity for us and for Pitkin, Eagle, and Garfield. In this case, we are regionalizing. As you all know, we've had a family engagement coordinator, Ligia Bonilla, who's been working for Pitkin and Eagle, Western Eagle, 16 hours a week, helping families apply for the Colorado Child Care Assistance Program. And under Ligia's amazing efforts, our CCAP numbers have tripled, which is awesome. I mean, she has found families in need. She's found that the application process is really onerous. They have trouble following all of the requirements and paperwork. She helps them do that, and they actually qualify, and their children are in safe and supportive and high-quality education environments. So we're really excited about that. We've had this grant for 2 years. And the state came forward and said, we're actually going to give all of the regions and the communities that have been getting this grant, we're going to give it to them again for another year. So our community, which is Lake, Eagle, and Pitkin, Garfield is also in our region, but they chose not to participate originally. We all met together and proposed the idea that we actually bring Garfield County in because they underutilize their CCAP dollars by providing Ligia, our family engagement coordinator, to go in and help their families complete applications, help their daycare centers maximize their revenues from CCAP, and and help educate their community about the benefits of early childhood education, because that will benefit us economically. That's our employee pool. It will benefit their families, and it benefits the region. And amazingly, the whole region was supportive. They had monies that they were not using. They've pooled them all together, and they want to give them to us for this project.
That's pretty amazing.
Is that amazing?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome. George?
So, I guess my question is, if we utilize, what's her name again?
Leah.
Because she's been so successful here, to go into Garfield County where you've got a county 3 times the population, and probably 10 times the need, is going to be overwhelming.
Well, we've talked a lot about that. Lee is very excited about the challenge. We will need their help. We have a draft memorandum of understanding that we would have with their department about what they need to do to help Leah. We would probably, so she'd go from 16 hours to 40. That's a huge increase in time. And she would continue to serve us, Eagle and Pitkin, but she would be focused at least 2 days a week down in the Western Garfield region. She can do a lot. She does a lot by phone. And she can do, we're talking about how to set her up even for televideo. I'm not going to use the right word, but FaceTime. You know, she can FaceTime with clients, and she won't have to travel. Garfield believes that the reason why they're underspent is that they have people who don't want to work. We believe that that might not be true. And so, and Leah wants to go find out. So it's
She's
like
great.
a perfect storm. Garfield's open, and we're motivated because we are so close. Pitkin, Eagle, and Garfield are so close that when one of us has like a weak point, it impacts the rest of us. So if we can strengthen Garfield's response to early childhood, that will serve us really well. So will Leah be overwhelmed? That will be my job, to supervise her and keep it. She's a very self-contained woman, and so I believe she'll totally know how to organize this and work it out. And there's only so much time, so at some point, you know, there may be people on the waiting list for Garfield. I don't know. We'll have to see. So
It's a start.
It's a start. We're just really excited about it, and we have a year to kind of look at numbers, and if it works, who knows, the state may give us money again. This model is very attractive statewide. Everybody's looking at this family engagement coordinator position and recognizing that it's making a huge difference in connecting families to these benefits. So it's nice to be able to help Garfield, because they've been so helpful to us in so many different areas.
Okay, so we need a nod here also to proceed with this.
We're not.
Big nod?
Big nod.
Okay.
Big nod.
I'll take that as a yes.
John?
Steve, I'm wondering, oh, sorry, I wasn't tagging
You're
on to
done.
this, but we have a number of staff here for open discussion items. I wonder if we might want to put those ahead of the future agenda and board reports, if it's okay with the board.
Sure, sure, that'd be fine.
Who's going first?
Well, so we had one listed, which I'm missing now, but Cindy, I believe that was yours.
I just wanted to remind the board that the Community Development Department, along with the U.S. Forest Service, is working on some management thinking up in Castle Creek that will then flow into our Castle Creek master plan. And as you know, the Maroon Creek and Castle Creek areas are looking at separate caucuses at this point, so we're not sure how it's going to turn out, but with the ultimate caucus groups right now. But we're working on some data gathering and information gathering from the citizens in the Castle Creek area, and anyone who is actually a user group in the Castle Creek area. We have a meeting scheduled at what used to be called the King Cabin, which is now called the
Adventure Lodge up in the head of the Castle Creek Valley. And that meeting's going to be from 4 to 6 on the 22nd of April. And we just wanted to remind the board that that was happening. And if you have any citizens that ask you about it, please direct them to either myself or Ellen, and we'll be happy to tell them about it. So a lot notices are starting to go out.
I was going to say, how else are you noticing?
We were very fortunate because Joe Wells, who's taken on trying to reformulate a Castle Creek caucus, sent out 350 notices to residents in the area. We were able to tack on our notice about the meeting on the 22nd to his mailing. And we will have press releases out. I was just going over those with Pat. It's been in the Monday morning paper. And it seems like we have we have just some mailing lists through the various ownerships in the Upper Valley that we've been in touch with.
Great, that sounds good.
How many people fit in the King cabin?
Well, I don't know that we've actually had a
cabin. The new cabin's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Oh, I haven't seen it.
It's beautiful and it's large.
I'll have to go up.
Yeah, and they have lots of benches, and John Wilcox has been very helpful in helping us set up the meeting. So it's really
I was
good.
thinking the old King cabin. I'm like,
no,
thank you for clarifying that, George.
Perhaps we should notice this because we're all going to want to go
I know, I
to the
might-
meeting to see the,
Well, we can talk about
see
it.
the facility.
We'd love to have you.
All right, the next open discussion item, I think, is going to become a weekly fixture for a while. We have facilities, we have Jody and Kathy. Why don't you come on up? I assume that's why you're here, unless there's something else.
In case something comes up.
But we thought we'd just kind of give you a weekly update informally on what's going on with our projects.
So Jody Smith, Facility Superintendent. Kathy Chandler from the library. Like John said, this is our first update. We wanted to keep the board and the public informed of what we're up to, where we're at in the process, maybe what kind of impacts we have in the area. As you know, and I'm not going to go into a whole lot, but I kind of wanted just to give you all an idea of what's all going on over there right now. There's just multiple projects going on. The City of Aspen has a Mill Street improvement project. The Aspen Sanitation has the sewer line replacement in the alleyway there. The Water Department decided to put a brand new line in while we had it all open. The efficiency of this combination is really huge to the community. Although the impact is there, I think it's going to clean up things up. CDOT is also replacing the traffic signals along Main Street. And then the Galena Plaza project is happening, which is part of the realignment or the regrading of the alleyway once the sewer line is in. So that big hump that goes down onto Mill Street won't be like that, and it'll become a more safer place. And then at the end of all of that, the library's kind of stuck in the middle of all of this stuff that's going on. And so we've just got a lot going on, and part of what we want to update you on is mostly the impacts. The garage work has had the permit for the garage work where we're actually cutting into the structure to reinforce that so that we can build on top of it. So that permit's been issued. The peel back is happening. We are currently right now about 8 days behind schedule. The peel back, it was a much different scenario once we got it open and started peeling all of that brick off where the walkways were. The concrete was much different than what we expected, taking some jackhammers. Also, those walls that kind of formed the sidewalks and the planters, we did not expect those to be rebarred in, and they weren't supposed to, so they're actually connected to the decking, so we're having to cut those walls off and it's just not done. So we're about 8 days. We believe, FCI believes that they're going to be able to make that time up. The beautiful part of that is that the coordination that we have with the city on the Galena side and the alleyway is working really well. We're talking every day. We go to their meetings where they're talking to their architects and their design team. They're actually learning from our experience of what we're finding, so it's going to really help streamline the process overall. And I think we're starting to we just put a new piece of equipment out on our side this morning, and we believe that it's going to start getting us caught up on that. The noise, we've had really no complaints, to my knowledge, none to FCI's knowledge, from our neighbors. FCI has done a really good job of going out and checking with ACRA on a daily basis. I go down there at least 3 times a week to say, how are you doing? We check with our neighbors, the bank, the courthouse, all the tenants in there, checking with the jail, dispatch. Everybody's been pretty happy, and I think that's really due to being proactive in this and making sure that we're really talking to them about what's going on and giving them solutions when we get to that point that it's no longer tolerable, if we get there. People are actually choosing in the courthouse, they want daylight over noise, so that's their option right now. But we do have a plan in case it becomes a point. I noticed that the city today is actually putting up 13-foot high walls, sound walls. They're not really walls, but they're high and they're going to absorb the sound, and those will be moved around as their part gets going, because they will be right up against the courthouse on that sidewalk at some point over the next few months. So overall, our noise mitigation in the courtrooms, they're completely happy with what we did proactively. Again, working with the city on a regular basis. We do have a third-party inspector coming in next week, because we will have our PIL back, all of the waterproofing off. He'll come in, inspect everything, document if there's damage. We have a construction agreement. The city will take care of that. We may end up doing it for them. We have some agreements in place, but he'll inspect it, and then at that point, we can start cutting into the garage piece of it. We've had some, and I'm guessing that that will happen in the next 10 days or so, where we start to penetrate down into the garage for the lowering of that children's room in the amphitheater. Because this is a fairly complex piece of the project, is cutting into those T's and bringing big beams in, we have, last week we met with public safety. We had Aspen Fire, Sheriff, APD, ambulance, 911. So they were all in a meeting. We all talked about what could happen, how we need to plan and be prepared to be proactive again, and if we need to shut down the garage for a short period of time while we do some really big, the heavy picks. We're prepared to do that. So we're all, again, collaborating, working, making sure that we have everything that we need. So FCI has a strong safety plan, and that will be what we work with, but also the fire marshal and the sheriff and PD will help to make that decision once we get those cranes set up to bring that one piece of equipment in. So and I'm sure that city building department will have, the chief building official has authority to make sure that that's all we're doing in compliance. Where else are we at? The library move. We did go out to an RFP. We had a pre-bid meeting this morning. We had a fairly good turnout. I think 5 or 6 companies this morning. It wasn't mandatory, so it's still open to people bidding that job.
Is this for moving the books
Yeah,
to the?
moving. So we're going to be moving 70% of the library to a storage unit in Snowmass Village, to a storage area in Snowmass Village, and then the remainder of that will go into the old art museum, which is the old powerhouse.
The new brewery.
The new library. The library. So that's all kind of in the works. We still have some things that we've got to get defined. The lease with the city's preparing a lease. And part of that lease is that the library is responsible for the utilities. We've double checked that. So that's where we're at with that.
Kathy, I thought last time you were before us, you mentioned that you may not have to do such a large move of the books because of how you're going to try to orchestrate the remodel.
Yeah, we're still in the process of value engineering, having to go in and look at how much we can afford to do of the renovation. And so that's where things are a little up in the air. But we're moving ahead, assuming that we will be able to do enough of the renovation that it makes sense to move out of the building.
Right. And we are still in a full fundraising campaign, so that if we get some donations, that will help us be able to complete the entire deal. Otherwise, we're value engineering some of the items and doing the big pieces and things that we can add later if we get a donation in a month or two. But so we're kind of just being really smart about that.
And how is that fundraising campaign happening? Because I know that ABH is kicking off their phase 3 of a major capital campaign as well.
Kathy, talk for that.
Well, we've been writing letters to individuals, doing grant proposals, trying to set up meetings with people that have helped the library in the past that we hope might be interested in helping in a significant way with this project. And we've raised, well, in between the requests that we've received, we have over $12 million. It's just that we're about $2 million short on where we really need to be. So we're continuing to plug away. The library, I don't think, is configured in the way that, I know it's just that you folks had looked at trying to do fundraising possibly for the new government building, and it's not.
I did.
Anyway,
I quickly disabused myself that was going to be realistic.
What a brave soul.
It's not as simple as it is, I think, sometimes for some other types of organizations that are structured differently.
Pretty funny, Jenny.
Well, and I would just want to clarify that we absolutely have the money to do the addition and the children's library. It's some of the other bigger pieces that, that we need to be able to make sure we can do. And we just need to be really systematic about what we can afford with the money we have. And then anything that comes in beyond that will help us.
And I just note, depending on how the fundraising happens, we may need to come back and have a discussion about cash flow, because how money comes in with fundraising versus what's most efficient for the project may not match up. And so Kathy and I have had preliminary discussions about, what if kind of scenarios. We're not to the if scenario or yet, but we may be coming back to talk to you guys about, hey, we think we can do this more efficiently if we help the library cash flow, and then kind of work back into their fundraising campaign. So more to come on that. Nothing definite yet, but we're having those discussions.
Rachel?
Yeah, well, I appreciate the update, and I bet we're going to have a lot more of those over the next, period of time. The one thing I wanted to mention is that I was kind of walking down this front sidewalk out here and heard a couple people, actually I was closer to the intersection there, going, it's really hard to get into the library now, or how are we supposed to do that? And literally some guy a day later was on that same, and he goes, in a car, can you tell me which way to the library? And I thought, not right now, not with all these, closed roads on Mill Street, and just imagining trying to tell him to come around by Carl's. And so I think it'd be good to see what we could do to get some temporary signs or some wayfinding that, even if it's, 8.5 by 11s laminated and you can staple them to the construction walls, but people do need to know whether it's go around and park and Rio Grande walk up the hill or whatever your directions are going to be to people, but we need to make sure people throughout this process with changing routes know how to get into the library.
And I will say we have 3 more days of Mill Street being closed.
I know, I can't wait.
And once that's open, we were completely, we did not expect that
the
one
one-way
side of
and
the
everything
library would be closed for that sidewalk. We knew from the alleyway up to Main, but there's some other parts that have
Yeah.
been, but it's really about a safety issue,
Yeah.
but I think we can try to figure out some.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be for this 3-day period, but over the course of the
Yeah.
construction, it will constantly be a changing thing you need to be on top of. Thank you.
So I was curious about the mitigation on the courthouse. And as I remember, we were going to replace windows on 2 sides of the building. Was that, and did that all get done? And,
We're out to bid for the window replacement. We had a pre-bid meeting this week, Monday. Yesterday?
That's yesterday.
We had a pre-bid meeting yesterday. We had a couple of people show up to that meeting. So we're really going to stage that, but it's probably going to be midsummer when we actually get
but the
going.
noise is right now.
What we ended
So
up doing is.
But the courthouse people are happy, so.
We had a noise mitigation company come in and do an evaluation. They wrote us a spec on how to build these inserts into the windows right now. And they're about this thick. Cost us about $1,000 a window, but they are doing their job. So right now the courtrooms were our focus. We built those, they fit in perfectly, they have seals around them, but the courtroom doesn't have any light, natural light, on that side of the building. And that's how we took care of the courtroom. That was our biggest, most concern. We also have inserts to put into the jury room if there was a big event that we needed to really give them the privacy. But right now, it's been really surprising. I thought that the tenants might want more sound mitigation. I met with the assessor's office this morning. They're fine. Treasurer said it's driving them a little bit crazy, but they're choosing light over that. So that we're really in communication about what can we do to help you be able to work and do your jobs early. So they all know to get a hold of us as soon as it starts to make them crazy.
Okay.
And so we'll have facilities in every week. I know we're gonna run out, we're getting crunched today on time, but thank you guys.
And if there's something that you want us to bring back, just let me know, and we'll bring it to you.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So next we have Kara back to talk about what George was asking about earlier, which is the energy impact grants. Pickens County doesn't get a lot of these. We're not sure when the last time we got one was. Yeah. So I'll let Kara talk about this, but just what's at issue here is part of their process is we have to have formal board approval to apply for the funds. And that is something we're on a very, very short timeline to do. I think it was due today, but they're letting us have it till, they're giving us till tomorrow. So we're trying to get an informal resolution on the agenda for you tomorrow.
And then just kind of to clarify, I think what Patty is asking, DOLA gets money from severance tax as part of their budget, and some of that is specific just to mineral impacted counties.
I wasn't asking George what.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't
Oh, I wasn't asking.
Well, I thought you referred to it a second ago, but it's not the same as getting severance tax from being a mineral producing county.
No, I didn't ask him.
Yeah,
Okay.
correct. No, this is a fund that's been set up specific for
So
broadband.
I can speak to Kara Silvernail again, Pitkin County Manager's Office. What DOLA decided to do is with that energy impact funds, which is the severance, they decided because of some of the state initiatives to earmark $20 million specifically for broadband. And while some of it is still that prioritization of energy mineral impact, they're also recognizing that it's just rural impacts as well. So within that energy impact fund, there's $20 million specific for broadband that kind of reprioritizes how they distribute those funds, which is kind of why Pitkin County is able to apply from. Yeah.
I'll add, when we do the DOLA grants through Northwest Cog, which is the same process, there is a clause in there, I don't know if you've seen it, that notates Pickens County's issues with old mining resources. So that was
We've made those
okay,
arguments
okay.
in the past.
Just want to
yeah.
make sure that that argument is thrown in there to leverage this grant.
And there is a new alabaster exploration mine in Redstone, you know.
You got it. You got it
might
covered.
Be the new marble.
We just want to make sure that
Yeah.
in our old
Yeah.
our old mining issues that all comes into play.
With respect to that as well.
Well, I fully support going forward with this grant, and if it's a resolution we need to add to the agenda tomorrow, I think that'd be fine.
It's
It
right
is
here.
something that's always controversial when you get to Colorado Counties, Inc. or to other organizations who say do not divert any energy impact funds away from, you know, just the impacted counties, and it's just always a dispute at the state budget level each year. And even this last year, this session, we saw 2 different bills introduced that would say no mineral impact funds can ever go to counties that have banned or have moratoriums on oil and gas drilling, and you know, a lot of these type of things, they've been defeated. But you know, we should get into the fund while we can, I guess is what I'm saying, because you never know when the ground rules will change.
And our local rep has been very good about working with us on
He's
our
great.
regional rep, Greg
Greg
Winkler. And just so the board is aware, we did get this posted as an informal resolution. The board has the ability to do those verbally, and we were working this literally Friday morning. So we did not have the resolution. And visiting with the attorney's office, we determined, yes, we could do it verbally, but it'd be better if we went ahead and reduced it to writing for the board's consideration. And so this will be, we're giving this to you today, but we'll also have it handed out tomorrow, is the first consent item on your agenda.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
thanks.
I've got other open discussion that they can wait, because I know we're getting tight on time, and we have
a severe time crunch.
Do we want to do future agendas rather than board updates, or?
Well, I actually have a future agenda item that I wanted to
Why don't we address that? Because we
run by, so let's do future agendas.
Yeah, so just real quick, if you've looked at your future agendas,
they're very different.
you'll see that we're starting to make the transition, and it's going to take some work to get these categorized correctly. Right now, we don't have them all timed out correctly, and not all the categories are filled out. But we wanted to put a stake in the ground and start this translation. Tomorrow is our first day under the new regular agenda structure. I think, frankly, the regular agenda structure is an easier transition than the work session agenda structure. Is a little bit more of a change. Tomorrow we'll talk a little bit just to introduce it to the public. Steve's asked me to go ahead and just speak a little bit to the change in the agenda format and what the consent agenda is and such up front. And so I'll be doing that. As we make this change and we have the board look at future agendas, one of the things we're going to be asking for feedback on is your comfort level with what we have listed on the consent agenda versus individual consideration. My sense is as we move along, what's going to happen is we're going to get into a rhythm on these a little bit more between aligning our work session agendas and our consent agendas and such, but the first few weeks are probably not going to be that well aligned. So we're going to be depending on you guys to give us feedback. Gosh, we really need to hear more about this, or I need to hear more about this before it's on a consent agenda, or whatnot. We may have to pull some things, you know, as we're making this transition. But the idea with the consent agenda, again, is to introduce them. Staff will go through and just give 2 minutes on each one, and then you guys can move them as a single motion, both in the first and second readings. Even you can open a public hearing on multiple items. You know, if they're consent, you probably don't have truly consent. You probably don't have anyone commenting on them anyway. So we'll be working through that. We do have one item we wanted to chat about, which is why Cindy was staying here on the tomorrow's agenda. Just real quick, we're proposing to continue the Elam gravel pit item again, and just kind of want to explain a little bit what's been happening and what our game plan is there, make sure you're comfortable with it.
Right. Elam was originally slated to come back tomorrow to the Board of County Commissioners. And in the interim, we've gotten together with the Bronze and with the Elams, with Elam. Who am I working with Elam? And we've done a site visit as well as sat down and thrown a bunch of potential alternatives on the table for mitigation. We've been up to look at the tree planting and to see how really unsuccessful to a certain extent that has been, and wanted to bring back some alternatives to the board. So we're asking the board to continue that meeting from tomorrow until the 22nd. And at the 22nd, I think what we'll have for you are the alternatives that are still left on the table that may not be fully implemented at this point, or even offered. We wanted to come back to the board and see what you have to say about those alternatives. And then also tomorrow at the meeting, it's just a continuance if you decide to go that direction. And it's the very last thing on the agenda. Elam has another meeting in Glenwood at 6 or 6:30, and I was wondering if we could put that at the beginning of the land use. Steve, rather than have it at the end of the land use items, just have it right up front so that they can get out the door, because it's really just a continuance.
So that would make it number 9 instead of number 10 would be all.
And I can do that, note that during additions, deletions to the agenda.
Rachel?
Well, I'm in agreement with taking the time necessary to get it right, especially seeing the Bronze involved directly on the site, things like that. A small clarification from the last meeting. I know I had mentioned the term wall, that may be something different, but I guess what I was really trying to get to is perhaps terracing, that might be necessary at some level to be able to get the vegetation to grow in a good bed of dirt and things like that. Maybe just trying to stick them in the hillside is part of the problem, but leave that to you guys and the professionals to see what opportunities might exist. But won't we need to also extend the current permit until the next meeting? We actually do the review?
It's part of the continuance.
So we'll continue
request
as
tomorrow.
well. Okay, I just wanted to make sure we were including that somehow.
I was thinking of the same thing.
So I will expect that to be item number 9 tomorrow. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And there's a lot of future agenda items to talk about, but I think I'd like to get another week of organizing under the new agenda format, unless the board has items. Steve, I think you
Well, the
mentioned
one that I noticed is there is no Tuesday, April 21st on this future agenda. And on Tuesday,
We're off that day.
April 21st, there is a senior center volunteer lunch from 12 to 1:30. That I'm planning on being at that at least for the first 45 minutes, and then if I have to be back here at 1, I can, but
Having it on a Tuesday?
on a Tuesday, it will be a lunch provided for senior center volunteers, which there are quite a few different volunteers who.
And then isn't Wednesday, the 22nd, the Northwest Cog Regional Volunteer Lunch? I thought it was on a Wednesday.
No, that's May 20th.
That's May. Okay.
Yeah, we will have a meeting on the 21st, so I'm not sure why that's not on there.
So that page was just left out of the.
It might be part of our
Switch over.
You're
transition
planning?
is
Are you
still a little
planning that?
shaky.
I don't know, it might be a good day to be off.
Okay.
So that's all I wanted to point out on the future agendas. Do we want to do board reports, or does everybody want a half-hour break before we go to city council?
We haven't had a break all day, basically.
I would rather do the board reports, continue that to another meeting and take a half-hour break, because we've been at it a long time today and we have city council coming up.
Okay. And everyone should have gotten the new agenda. We had some communication challenges at different staff levels, but the agenda is going to be you know, the housing guidelines, uphill economy, water issues, and open discussion. And so we didn't get that straightened out until, I think, yeah, Monday.
Okay.
So, okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
See
you.
you guys over there. Thank you.
Everybody over at City Hall in a little bit.